Hey everyone, Charlie Morgan here, and welcome to Oscillatory Life Cycles. So, now that you understand that basically everything's your fault, we need to know what to do about it. It's all good and well me telling you that you need to take responsibility and you need to become he or she who can, but the question is, well, how do you actually do that? And a huge proponent of this is what we call your oscillatory life cycles, which are basically the patterns of your existence that you oscillate between. So for everything in your life, you've got a high point and a low point. And in the same way that a air conditioning system would work or homeostasis would work, you have this sort of, what would you call it, tendency to bounce between 2 points. And that might be a little confusing. You might be like, well, what do you mean? Like, I just, I don't have those things. But you do. In the same way that like in the air conditioning unit works, if it needs to, average the temperature of, let's say, 18 degrees Celsius, then what it will do is it will use cold air when it gets a little too hot, and it will use hot air when it gets a little too cold. And what it'll try and do is basically balance out the AC system to find an average temperature as consistently as it can. And what you have in your life is you have your average state of existence or your average behaviors. And those are kind of the problem right now, because we know that your reality comes from your behavior and how that you act. And we know that that comes from your belief systems. So we need to actually start exploring this behavior thing and figuring out like why you are bouncing between the points you're bouncing between and what the problems are. So it'll all make sense, I promise. We're going to start with cyclical behavior, breaking the cycle. So we're going to explore how to actually break your cycles. Like, have you ever had it before where, 1 minute you're really confident, you're, full of vigor, and you're like, yes, I'm going to crush it, I'm really motivated. And then the next minute or the next day or the next week or the next month, you're really doubtful and you're terrified and you can't seem to get out of bed, let alone do the work. And you bounce between these emotional states and this behavioral thing. So we're going to explore how to break that and how to basically, not have this massive up and down cycle that you keep going through. Then we're going to talk about flipping the floor, component epiphany, the delusion pocket, present, past, and future. And we're actually going to start taking some action now, where we define the current and becoming self. We're going to get real clear on basically mapping out your current identity and then mapping out the identity of the person that you would need to become to achieve your goal, so you can sort of compare the two and you can start looking at them and thinking, geez, okay, I really need to, do some work here and let go of this current self, and we're going to get really clear on that. So without further ado, welcome to Oscillatory Life Cycles. Here we will explore the oscillations of your existence and why you keep going up and down with everything. We'll shine a light on your behavior and talk about why you have ruts, inconsistencies, and struggles. So you probably have this. You're well aware of this fact that, sometimes you enter a rut, and a pretty big one, and sometimes you'll have these big down periods in your life and these inconsistencies and everything just seems like a struggle. Why does that happen? Like, why can't you just consistently do what you know you need to do to get what you want? Because what I can tell you is that becoming successful and making lots of money, it's not about your good side. It's not about the light side of you being all happy and motivated and doing the work. That doesn't really matter. That moves you forward, and we need to cultivate that and definitely use that. But the real thing, the thing that really moves the needle in life is the downside, and how it's not about how high your highs are, it's about how low your lows are. Because if we can have the highs but not have the lows, then my goodness, will you make some progress? It's the destructive side of you that we need to get rid of and destroy, as opposed to nurturing the constructive side, because that side's always going to exist. So then we'll talk about your becoming self and really define who you would need to become to really just achieve your goal and break these cycles. And here's a quick quote, and I want you to keep this in the back of your mind throughout this training and video, and I'm going to circle back to this quote towards the end of the video and it will make way more sense. But for now, I just want you to sort of make a mental note of this, so that when we come towards the end of the video, you just have this click. We're like, oh, I get it now. And the quote is from Sam Ovens, who mentored me, and he's now a billionaire. So he knows a thing or two about how to make money, trust me. And Sam used to say, or used to tell me, it doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. And this quote basically encapsulates this idea of the becoming self. It really does not matter who you are, only who you believe you are, because with work you will become that person. And so this kind of beautifully summarizes this whole idea of beliefs and becoming self and everything. So don't worry about it too much now, but we will re-explore this quote and it will be recontextualized, and I want you to drill this into your brain because this basically summarizes the entire mindset module. So, cyclical behavior. Let's get into it. Now, as you attempt to develop yourself into he or she who can, and basically, become your becoming self, what's going to happen is you're going to experience a constant wave of ups and downs, peaks and troughs, wins and ruts. Now, you don't even have to try to develop into he who can or she who can, and you have these things anyway, right? You definitely experience this in your life right now, where you make progress, somewhere. Let's just highlight this before it annoys me. You make progress somewhere, only to tear it all down a short while after. And it feels like there might be two versions of yourself in life. You've got a constructive, productive version of you, and then you've got the destructive, lazy version. And really, it feels like humans are at war with themselves. They cycle between two versions of themselves. One, which by nature builds them up to a point where they're behaving properly. They're acting, what needs to be acted on. You're doing the work. You probably have this side in you right now. You're watching this video. You're going through the mindset training. You're on this high. You're all motivated. Suddenly you're thinking differently, and maybe you're reading stuff, and things are clicking, and you're all up and happy. But then there's another version of you that is just waiting to come to fruition, and just waiting around the corner, that destroys all the progress you've made, decimating all the progress and setting you back to the start. And this thing is savage, okay? The average version of the self, okay, so the average version of you and what your life really looks like is the average of these two states, okay? This is the average of your existence. And this cyclical nature of progress naturally manifests in any individual chasing growth, regardless of where it may be in their life. And we call this an oscillation or a cycle. And we can experience these oscillations and cycles in all areas of life and all areas of nature. Okay, so for example, you could have the seasons and how the weather looks, and how we have summer and it gets really hot, and then we have winter and it gets really cold, and then it repeats, and then we might have spring here and autumn here, and we have this with tidal patterns, on oceans. We have this with predator-prey relationships in the natural world as well. This thing exists everywhere, and because you are a product of nature and biology, and your brain and your psychology is developed and built to from a biological source, because you're part of nature, naturally you experience this as well. And what we can see is this blue line here, this little dotted blue line in the middle, basically represents the average. And so what happens in life is we oscillate like this, and when we oscillate, when we go up and down, we can draw an average. And so you're going to have oscillations for basically everything. Not everything, not entirely everything, but the things that you're trying to push towards and grow, like making money, like business, like your health, like your relationships, like the cleanliness of your apartment, like anything that matters to you, really, you are going to either be up or down. But sometimes you'll be right at the top, sometimes you'll be right at the bottom, but a lot of the time, most of the time, you're going to be in a state where you're either going up or going down. But it doesn't really matter where you are. What matters is that over time, if we mapped your state of existence over a long enough time horizon, we would find an average which would be of the two. And the interesting thing about the oscillations is they're incredibly predictable, and you build yourself up to a certain point, and then you do not let yourself go below a certain point. It's absolutely fascinating how this stuff works. So here we're building up, behaving well, staying disciplined, keeping promises to ourselves. If we say we're going to do something, we actually do it. And then what happens is we hit a peak. And this is really fascinating because your peaks are trackable, and you can notice them, and you can see exactly what's going on. And you'll hit a peak, and that peak will be predictable, and it will be the same peak almost every time. And then basically what happens after you hit your peak is you start breaking things down. You start destroying your progress and regressing back to old standards and behaviors. And so, I can give you an example. When I was a lot younger, I was temporarily addicted to smoking. Not for long, but I was, for a very short while. And it was really strange. Like, what would happen is I would go through this oscillation where I tried to quit smoking, and then I would try to, then I'd really try to quit. And what would happen is I'd quit for, 3 or 4 days. And on the 3rd or 4th day, it was like I hit my peak for quitting, and I'd be like, oh, one won't hurt. And then like I'd get back to like basically chain smoking again. And then I'd hit this bottom where I'd smoke like probably a certain, milligram quantity of nicotine, right? And I'd hit this bottom, feel really shit, like my body would feel horrible, and then I'd get really angry at myself, and then what would happen is I'd quit again for 3 or 4 days. And basically, I would quit for 3 or 4 days, and then I'd smoke for 3 or 4 days, like a week, and then I'd quit again for 3 or 4 days or a week, and it was so insanely predictable. And you probably see this with other addictions that you have. Maybe you're trying to quit video games, you're trying to quit eating certain junk foods or something, and it's just predictable. It's actually quite miraculous how predictable it is. And yeah, we break down regressing back to old standards and behaviors. And then what happens is we hit a low that is simply intolerable. And you have lows, and you have these ruts, these low points that are really painful to experience. But what happens is you get to a certain point that is almost always quantifiable. Like for me, it was smoking. I'd smoke a certain number of cigarettes or smoke for a certain number of days, and there'd be like this little weird switch in me that would just like ping, just switch on, and then suddenly I'd be completely motivated to quit again, and like I wouldn't smoke at all. And there was nothing anyone could do to get me to smoke in this little 3-4 day window here. There was nothing. Even if someone was like, I'll give you, $10,000 for a cigarette, not going to happen. Like, it's weird how you hit these lows, and you just, there's this level of tolerance that you have that you just won't accept this behavior anymore. And then what happens is you repeat the cycle. You go back up, you go back down, you go back up, you go back down. And I discovered this cycle once I started trying to fix my behavior and become someone new. So, as soon as you, as soon as you set a goal, that goal kind of casts a shadow. And what I mean by that is it gives you this dark side, because suddenly you're going to want to start moving towards the goal and making progress, but by nature, for every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. And so when you create this new version of yourself you need to become, you almost create this like arch enemy that you need to defeat that, basically is like trying to come out and get you and bring you down. So then I build myself up, I'd act out good habits and make the right decisions and start changing my life. Then I'd hit a certain point, i.e. a peak, and start doing the exact opposite thing that I was supposed to be doing. And this seemed completely out of my control, and it really did feel like this just happened to me. It didn't feel like something that I was able to change. It didn't feel like something I was able to control, let alone, even become aware of. It was like my existence was just this. I was, doomed to repeat this thing. And I believed at the start that I had no say in the matter, and that my behavior in this wave was just out of my control. I had peaks and troughs everywhere in my life when I was trying to grow, and I couldn't really seem to do anything about it. And in business, for the first year in business, I would oscillate between levels of income. And so what would happen is I'd get to a certain point of where I was making a certain amount of money, and then I'd get comfortable and start playing video games and start fucking around and smoking again, and then just eating shit and laying around watching Game of Thrones or whatever for like a week on end. And I'd do that, and then my business would start to fail, and I'd get no clients, and my client results would fall off, and I'd lose clients, and I'd get to a certain level of income that that was intolerable for me, like a couple of $1,000s a month or something. And then I'd suddenly panic and start being motivated again and fixing everything and getting back up to this point, which was like $10,000 a month. And then I'd get comfortable again, and then back down. I'd be back down to like $3,000 a month, and I just bounced between these 2 points for so long. But then I started to notice something. As I became more aware of this cycle of behavior, I really asked myself the question. I was like, so if I want to achieve my goal, what if I just try and focus on not having these ruts? Like, what if I try my very, very best to avoid the downside? Because, if I could just make $10,000 and continue doing the work and continue being motivated, then I would grow. It doesn't quite work like that. You can't just, it's not as simple as just being like, I'm not going to do it, because, there's emotions involved, and saying you're not going to do it is the kind of thing that you say when you get to this low point, and you forget all about that attitude when you get to the high point. But what I noticed, which was really interesting, which was the first piece of the puzzle to breaking these cycles, And it was that my highs and lows of my behavior were predictable. And I could really predict exactly where I was going to go. And, depending on where I was in this cycle, I could map out exactly what I was going to do and how my behavior was going to go. And I started becoming way more self-aware. And what I noticed is that the level that I would reach here, whether it was my income or my behavior or my habits or whatever the hell, my meditation, anything, the level I'd reach here, my Aura Ring sleep score, my Watt Band sleep score, whatever that stuff was, right? The level I'd reach here was the same level I would reach here after destroying and rebuilding everything. And likewise, the level that I reached here was the same level I'd reached here after destroying everything. And I started tracking everything in my life with spreadsheets, and I'll give you some examples in a second. But this happened everywhere in my life. So, the things that I was working on and trying to turn around and improve were my financials, my personal finances, my business success, the consistency of me going to the gym, my diet quality, how clean my apartment was and how clean my house and room was, my general habits, reading, trying to read nonfiction, meditation, my bedtime, so what time I was waking up, what time I was going to sleep, sleep quality, relationships quality, social life, and also this happened everywhere in my business. So my client results would be up and down. My closing rate would be up and down. Not so much at the beginning, but sometimes it can happen where your team culture fluctuates up and down, mainly because of your mood and how you treat your team. How many appointments I would book would go up and down, etc. Everything in my business. So what I'm going to do now is give you some personal examples from when I began. So this was over 7 years ago before I figured out how to crack this thing. Because there is a way, trust me, there is a way. There's a silver lining here. So one thing I would oscillate between was the amount of money I had in my savings account. So, for example, I would make money and I would save money. And what would happen is, as soon as I got to £10,000 in savings, that was like my peak. As soon as I got there, I became comfortable. I started getting a bit proud, and I would start to spend money. And I would start to just splash out on expensive dinners and stuff and whatever, clothes, and I don't even know what the hell I bought, to be honest. But what would happen is I would just start spending it. It's like, I'm at 10k now, like I'm sitting pretty, and then I just start spending it. And what would happen is, after a month or two of reckless spending, I'd get down to £5,000. And for me, £5,000 was like the lowest point imaginable that I could tolerate. It was my panic number. And, as soon as I got to £5,000, I wouldn't spend a penny. Like, there was nothing you could get me to spend money on except from the bare necessities for survival. I'd stop going out, I'd stop buying clothes, I'd stop going to restaurants, I'd stop buying drinks, I wouldn't buy anything. I wouldn't even buy, stuff that I needed half the time. And what would happen is, I'd basically, turn off the spending tap and start saving again. And after a while, I'd get back to £10,000 in savings and be like, oh yeah, this is great. And then I'd start spending again. And then I'd spend until I only had £5,000. And it was really predictable, because this one is about as easy as it gets to track, because I could literally see my bank statements. I downloaded my bank statements from my personal bank, and I saw that just, month after month, I was oscillating between 10k and 5k. And the average amount of money that I had in my account at any given time was £7,500. And I calculated the average, and it literally was £7,500 was the average over the course of like 6 to 9 months. And this is interesting because you have a panic number. You definitely do. Even if you don't realize it, your panic number could be, being £1,000 into your overdraft, or being, £1,000 in debt, credit card debt or something, or maybe 100,000 in debt. But you have a panic number. You really do. And you have a safety number, and it might not be, exaggerated per se, but my goodness, do you have these things, right? Another example, fitness. So what I would do sometimes is in my peak, I'd be going to the gym 5 times a week, training really hard, running 15 kilometers per week, with full intensity, long gym sessions, like properly taking care of myself, and really, really exercising properly. And, I'd do that, and I'd be at that peak. And then I'd start getting tired, and I'd be a bit burned out, my central nervous system and the cope would start to creep in. And the rut, my low point, was just going on 1 run per week. And that was it. I just run on Sunday. Like I wouldn't work out for like the entire week, get to Sunday and be like, oh, like I feel like I'm an idiot and I feel like a dickhead and I feel shit because I haven't worked out. So I'd go on a quick 5-kilometer run. And that was, I couldn't not do that run. Even if I was like sick or bloody mortally wounded, I'd still do this run just because that was the lowest point I could tolerate. There had to be some sort of fitness, if that makes sense. And then also I had this with my diet. So, you know, typically fitness and diet tend to go hand in hand. So at my peak, I'd be eating 3,000 calories of lean foods. So proper lean, you know, carbs, proteins and fats, no coffee, no sugar, no fast food, no junk food, no snacks, like just perfect, clean athlete style diet. And, you know, I'd do that for a period of time. And then what would happen is I'd start feeling really good and I'd start making real good progress and getting really shredded. And, you know, after a certain point, I almost felt too good. And I was like, for some reason, I just come in and just break it down and completely destroy it. And then, you know, what would happen is I'd start just, you know, the odd chocolate bar here and there, and then the odd crisp packet, and then, you know, the odd burger here and there. And then what would happen is I'd just completely slip. And then I'd be at the point where I'm eating McDonald's a couple of times a week. I'd just be going to the cupboard to eat snacks and cereal, loads of shitty carbs, saturated fats, oils, seed oils, takeaways, chocolate, sugar, caffeine. Like I just completely destroy it. And then what would happen is I'd feel like absolute shit, as you do when you eat these things. And I'd get to the point where I feel so shit that something in me, like the thermometer, my diet thermometer, my feeling thermometer would just trigger. And I'd get to a point where I couldn't tolerate it anymore. And suddenly I'd start eating like healthy again. And then like, you know, I'm removing the caffeine and the sugar. And then like I'd get to this point where I'm exactly back here. And it was scary. I could just literally track this and see it with my diet apps. Same thing with sleep. You know, at my peak, I'd be going to bed at 8, be going to bed at 10:30, wake up at 6:30, perfect sleep, like perfectly disciplined, 8 hours, perfect REM, deep sleep, tracking, everything, all on lock, you know, blue light blockers, no food before bed. And then what would happen is I'd let it go. And, you know, I'd start going to bed at 11 or 12, or, you know, I'd start waking up a little bit later and not having an alarm. And, you know, it's so stupid. I'd eat before bed and I'd start playing video games and working before bed. My sleep would start to suffer. And then, you know, at my rut here, at my low, you know, I'd be going to bed at like 3:30, waking up at like 11 sometimes, sleeping for like 6 hours on average, and like messing up all my behavior that I knew would interfere with my sleep. And I'd get to this point and then I'd correct it again. And up and down and up and down I went. Same thing with sales. Up here, I'd have strong conviction, selling like a demon. Down here, you know, I wouldn't even bother on a sales call. Really weird. You know, sometimes I'd be an absolute killer on a call, and other times it was like I'd never sold before. And same thing with my consistency for all my habits. There would be, you know, peaks that would feel amazing where, you know, I'm perfectly lined up and all my habits are perfectly in line. And then down here, there's no action, no plan, like just completely inconsistent and uncommitted to every area of my life. And my mental health would track this as well. You know, sometimes it felt like I was like bloody bipolar or something. And I wasn't, because I know someone that is, and yeah, we won't go down there. But, you know, sometimes it can feel like you are like this weird person where there's two pieces of you. And it's perfectly normal. And I don't think it means that you've got like an illness or anything like that. But this is what happens when you have extreme goals and you want to make extreme progress. Is for every action there is an opposite equal reaction, and, you know, you have to be willing to fight. And really the only thing that you're fighting, you know, with this progress you're trying to make is yourself. And that's why you can start thinking like, is there something wrong with me? It's like, no, you're just casting a shadow, which is basically the phrase that I use when this goal is massive. And, you know, you want to make 6 figures, multi-6 figures, 7 figures. You want to be in the top 1%, 0.1%, 0.0001% of earners. And you want to do that on your own, independently building a company. It's not easy. It's you know, wanting that, there's got to be some sort of consequence. And the pain is the consequence. And the real pain you feel is the battle you have to go through yourself. And it kind of can't be any other way. And so my mental health, I'd be clear and focused and happy at this point. No anxiety, completely aligned. And then down here, I'd be terrified, you know, brain fogged, apathetic, depressed, like miserable. and then I'd kick it back up, you know. And I'm sure this was all related to, you know, my mental health was just a product of my sleep and, you know, my diet and my fitness and like the money that I had and stuff. So it's all related. You know, this oscillation it's typically if one thing's up, everything's up, and if one thing's down, everything's down, right? You know, we're quite extreme as entrepreneurs. We're quite extreme by nature in our behavior, and if you start letting one thing slip in your life, like if your sleep starts to go, then boy oh boy, it's over for everything. Like everything just, you know, takes a hit. And my environment, so, you know, my work environment, my bedroom and stuff, my kitchen and stuff, you know, at the peak when I was in monk mode, basically, I'd be clean, organized, vacuumed, mopped, clothes ironed, folded away, bills paid, emails replied to, like everything in order. Like my desktop would be perfectly clean. And then like I'd get to this peak and then I'd start breaking it down. And at the bottom here, I'd be completely mess, disorderly, dusty, piles of dirty clothes, bed unmade, wearing dirty clothes, email inbox piling, just complete chaos. Like not replying to people for like a week and just letting things just get really messy, right? Screen time, you know, at my peak, I'd be doing less than 45 minutes. In my rut, you know, this is funny, really, like, you know, because what you'll notice is you become more cognizant of your cycles, is there are triggers and very specific trigger behaviors that you start to do to enter into this rut. And one for me with my screen time would be re-downloading Instagram. And so what would happen is I get my screen time sometimes even to like, you know, 20 minutes a day. And what would happen is I'd get this impulse, this sort of urge out of nowhere to just re-download Instagram. I don't know where it came from, but I started noticing it, and sometimes I couldn't stop it. But you'll notice that there are behaviors and there are patterns. Like for example, with the environment thing, one thing that, you know, I would basically stop doing was putting my clothes away. Like, you know, if I finished like doing the washing and I hung my clothes up and they were dry, like one behavior that I noticed with the environment thing is I would just leave them on the clothes horse. And there are these little markers of behavior, you know. Same thing, for example, with my sleep. Like one thing I'd notice is like if I got the urge to watch one more YouTube video or one more episode, and then I'm going to bed like, you know, 30 minutes later, an hour later than I was scheduled, there are these, when the cracks start to show, you can become really aware of the behaviors and the impulses that get you. And your brain, it knows you very well, so it knows exactly what to put in front of you to have you act impulsively in a way that is counterintuitive towards your goals. And, you know, another example here, with my diet, this is really obvious. Like, I'd be eating really clean, and what I would eat every day is I'd eat oatmeal, which I don't know if it's healthy or not. You could argue it's not because it's carbs, whatever the hell, I don't care. But I'd eat oatmeal, and I was strict, like no sugar. Like on my oatmeal, I'd have like, it might sound weird actually, but it's actually quite good. I'd have yogurt, and I'd have dark chocolate, like, you know, 70% dark chocolate, and almond butter, and I'd eat that. Basically, I'd fast until like 12 or 1 o'clock every day, and then I'd eat this big bowl of oatmeal. And it, in hindsight, probably wasn't the best thing to eat for productivity into the afternoon, but it was fine. There was no sugar in it. There was no like crap in it, right? Whatever. But what I'd notice is I'd eat this consistently, and in the evening I'd eat this like some healthy meal in the evening. What I noticed with this oatmeal thing is I'd get this impulse to put golden syrup on it, or like sugar, you know. And I would never do this, but then every now and then, like, I'd be like, oh, do you know what I really want? I think I'll put some golden syrup on it. And then I put the golden syrup on, and then bang, that was it. That was the peak. Like, as soon as I engaged in that behavior, whoosh, we're going down to the bottom. And then, you know, before I know it, I'm ordering like junk food, and like I'm eating like just honey out of the jar, and like I'm just eating crisps and stuff, and like bang, it's over. And the same thing is true, there's a mirror here, but the same thing is true when you hit the rut, is, you know, it's like you get this weird urge to stop eating this junk food. And there are behaviors that typically the easiest ones to track are the ones that begin the rut, because, you know, if you can just put off that impulse, like if you can hit the peak and become really aware of your emotions and the behaviors that your body just feels compelled to engage in, and just become aware of them and be like, nope, not today. I'll do it tomorrow. And then when tomorrow rolls around, you say, not today, I'll do it tomorrow. And you keep putting it off. For example, when I had £10,000 in savings, I'd get to this point where like I just get this weird urge to just buy clothes. And the behavior in question, the impulse I'd get would be to open up my phone and go to Google and type in ASOS.com, which is a clothes website if you're not familiar with it. And I'd go to ASOS and I'd just start scrolling and buying things and spending hundreds of pounds on clothes that I didn't need. And that was like the exact behavior that would manifest, right? And then the rut would begin basically. And this is really cool because I was absolutely fascinated to watch these patterns unfold, and I kind of became a like third-party observer of my behavior, and I could basically track all of my behaviors to a T, and I even started gathering data on them. So like this was me in 2017, so when I was a teenager, and what you can see here is I had an Oura ring, which is a device that you use to track your sleep. And it's really fascinating what you can see for months on end here. And sometimes these oscillations, right, it can be like a week-long thing, or it can be a month-long thing, or it could even be a year-long thing. So, really there's no hard rule to this thing being like, it could be 24 hours, it could be a month, it could be 3 months, whatever. And so, for example, like what you can see here in 2017 is you get this sleep thing, right? So, June, July, August, September, I'm bed before 11 p.m. every night, and I'm waking up around 7 a.m. every single night, right? And that's good. I'm waking up at 7 a.m. But then what happens suddenly, after 4 months of consistency and 4 months of basically making this perfect sleeping pattern, I break it. And then I'm going to bed at like 2 a.m. And then I can guarantee you, if I check my Aura stats, like January, the year after, would have been back to perfect for like another couple of months, and then it would have been back to, late again. And this thing over here is my meditation tracker. So you can see this here. I'm tracking for January of 2017 here. And this over here, I believe, is September 2017. So, 9 months apart, to be fair, but this pattern still, basically just cascaded. I track my meditation. And so, in January of 2017, or is that? No, sorry, this is August 2017. Sorry, August and September 2017. So August 2017, I'm perfectly in line, meditating every day. Like I'm only missing a couple of meditation sessions here, meditating 27 times in a month. And then the next month, I'm only meditating 5 times in a month. And another example here was my reading. So I would track my reading and how much reading I would do and how focused I was with my reading sessions and how many pages and minutes and stuff I was reading for. And we can see June, July, and August and September perfectly reading every day, reading like, 20, 30 pages a day, like properly focusing, reading for hours and hours and hours. And then like suddenly October's like 5 days of reading, and then November, December, I didn't bother at all. And so, like my oscillations and my behaviors would typically cascade over anywhere between a 2 to 4 month period. And so, I'd spend a month or two building it up and being at the peak. And I could sustain the peak for a month or two, sometimes even like 3 months. Like I'd be like completely in check. But then, bang, I'd destroy it. And then the 3-4 months of me being at the bottom. And this was just the state of my existence. It would just be like, a couple of months of like bliss and heaven where everything was going really well. And I was making money and saving money and eating really clean and feeling just great, no habits, no bad habits, no addictions, just totally in this monk mode state of Zen. And then, the cracks would start to show, and then I'd break it down and be in this really low point for like a month or two. The low points didn't necessarily last for like 3 months, but sometimes they'd last for weeks and weeks on end. And the funny thing is you can still make progress like this as long as your up points are significantly longer than your low points. I can give you an example recently. So in my life recently, I just got back from a holiday where I went to Marbella, and I've been in a pretty solid state of behavior, with building this course and everything. and my sleep and my diet and my gymming, everything's been great. And I'm way more disciplined now, and I don't have these cycles, these ups and downs. But you can't escape it completely. But you have to become intentional. So let me give you an example. So really, since the start of this year, being 2025, I've been majorly disciplined, perfectly in check and everything like that. And I went to Marbella for a week. And during that time, I behaved as if I was 17-year-old rut mode again. Because what started to happen, after 4 months of perfect discipline, is I became very burned out, very exhausted, and I needed to recharge. And so what I did is I went to Marbella, and I intentionally, and this is the key word here, is intentionally engineered my habits and behavior to basically completely rest and give myself massive time off. And so, during this holiday, I'm eating anything I want. So, usually I'm in this perfectly strict carnivore style, keto style, but diet. But during this holiday, I was eating ice cream out of the tub. I even started, all my bad habits came back into check, like everything that you could imagine, like all this crappy behavior that I used to have just poured out of me. But the cool thing is I can check that, and I can decide when to do it and when not to do it. And so I told myself, I was like, right, we're going to take a full week off of everything. You're not going to even go to the gym. You're not even going to check emails or anything, just completely time off. And the cool thing is I've now got control over this. So it's, for me, that behavior is a tool, because I went into this massive, what you could consider a rut for a week, didn't do anything productive, completely slovenly and lazy, laid around, watched YouTube all day, just nothing. But then the second that holiday was over, the second I hopped on that flight, I do a 3-day fast and I'm straight back into work. And sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes these negative behaviors and these bad habits are productive, because sometimes rest is work. And we're going to talk more about this as we move through the mindset module in terms of managing your discipline and knowing when to stop and when to take time off. But the cool thing is, now that I've done that for a week, I can go hard for another 3 weeks, for another 3 months. And, in 3-4 months from now, maybe even 2 months, but probably 3 months from now of perfect discipline, the cracks are going to start showing. I'm going to get really burned out and tired and everything. And then when that happens and I start to notice the writing on the wall in terms of my mood and my energy, I'll just take another week off, engage in all the bad behaviors, rest and fully recuperate by, I don't care if it's me just scrolling through Instagram reels for a whole week or eating, Ben and Jerry's for a week or whatever. I'll do that, and then I can switch out of it. And what happens when you transcend this cycle is you learn that you need to sometimes have these ruts, because all your body's doing with these ruts is protecting you, because it doesn't want you to burn out. And your psychology, you've got this sort of mental stopping mechanism where if you go too far, you'll burn yourself out, and you're going to be in some serious pain, and you can sometimes even get in real trouble. I used to burn myself out so bad. Like when I was starting my first business when I was like 18, I once burned myself out so bad that I had to go to the doctor, and I had to go to A&E because I was having panic attacks. I burned myself out so bad that my body and my mind, I started to disassociate from reality. There's this illness in psychology called dissociative personality disorder, and I don't have it, but I started getting symptoms of it because I worked and I disciplined myself so much and so hard for so long that I got mentally ill. And that's not even a joke. It's not even an exaggeration. It would be, the only way I can describe it is a state of brain fog that is so heavy that you don't even know if you're awake half the time. Anxiety that is through the roof, panic attacks. And when you talk to people, it doesn't feel like they're there, and it feels like you're the only person on the planet. That's what happens when you push this too far. And so what you need to be able to do is read the writing on the wall, know your body and your mind, and keep the rut in your back pocket, because what happened to me is I was in this complete state of discipline, David Goggins style, for probably 7 or 8 months. And it was awful after a while. And what happened is I messed my body up so bad and messed my mind up so bad that I then had to take like 4 months off. Then I did this, the thing that I did in Marbella, where I was recently, or I was eating whatever the hell I wanted and, playing video games and all this shit that I never ever do, that's no longer part of my identity. Like I had to behave like that for like 4 or 5 months just to recover from this burnout that I give myself, right? So there is ways to hack this, and there is utility in the rut. And all your body's trying to do is find an equilibrium, like a healthy equilibrium, so that you don't go too far and end up really doing some damage to yourself. Because I did that, and I can attest to it. And I think there's merit in it, because I think every entrepreneur and I think every person really should push themselves beyond their healthy limits and go to that place. Because for me, like, I know the worst thing that can happen with my burnout, and it's very unpleasant and it's horrible, and I really do not enjoy it. But I know that if I absolutely had to, I could go there, and that's the worst thing that could happen to me. And that gives me a lot of confidence, because if everything started failing, then I know that I've got a good 6, 7, 8 months of pure focus where I could lock myself in a room and not talk to anyone and not do anything, and it would be horrible, but I could do it. But then the consequence of that is I'd have to take 5 months off afterwards, right? So anyway, bit of a sidetrack, but you get my point. These things are this oscillation, whilst we might hate it and whilst it might be the bane of our bloody existence, it does actually serve a greater biological and psychological purpose of you not, really hurting yourself and doing damage. Having said that, though, there is a solution to it, and the solution is you can do it in a healthy way, okay? So you most certainly resonate with this idea, and you can probably think of a dozen examples in your potential life or in your personal life that you oscillate between. The key is basically becoming aware of the levels which you oscillate and start tracking and defining your highs and lows. Because trust me, you have highs and lows, right? You have very predictable patterns and benchmarks in your life. So what I want you to do now is just take a quick second here, and I want you to write down what you oscillate between. So I want you to write down 10 examples in your life that oscillate, okay? If you can't think of 10, then just try a little harder, because you have a ton of these and you need to become aware of them, because we can't really fix what we're not aware of. So I want you to basically list out, write down now all these oscillations, track and trace them. And if you can, grab this resource here, and you can go to File and make a copy to make your own copy. Print this out if you can, and write down, oscillation of my finances or of my relationship with my father. It can be anything, right? And then what you want to do is you want to become aware of your peaks and your troughs, okay? So everyone has this for money. I know you do. Everyone has this probably for health. So write it down. Write down what are you at your peak and what are you at your trough? And you can even define the average if you want. So print this off. If you haven't got a printer, then you can always just draw this on paper and just draw 10 of these and become aware of them, right? So go and write them down now. Don't put it off. Do the action item, because if you understand these patterns, you can really break them. Until you can stare at this thing, and the reason I broke these is because I had all the data and stuff, right? This is quite extreme, but until you can look at this thing and map it on a little graph on a piece of paper, it doesn't really exist. It's not really real, and you can't really attack what isn't real. So go and do that right now. Make a list of all these things, and I want you to be able to see them. I want you to become aware of them. I want you to become aware of your highs and your lows, and don't put this off. I know you maybe you're thinking this right now, oh, I'll do this at the end of the video, or I know them, I've got it in my head. Don't be a dick. Don't be an idiot. Bloody do the work, because until you take this seriously, you're not going to become successful, okay? So, breaking the cycle. So now let's talk about how to break it. If you know that it exists, then you can actually break it. And breaking the cycle is as simple as, you might think that we're trying to, stay in this state forever or avoid this state forever. But all we're trying to do is just raise your best and raise your worst and improve the average state. Because it's all about the average state, okay? It's far less about your best and it's far less about your worst. It's just more about the average of the two. Okay, because you are not defined by your high points, okay? And you're not defined by your low points. You're the average of the two. So if you tracked your behavior, your life, or your reality, any component like money or health, you'd be able to find an average. And this really exists everywhere in your life, okay? So what we can do is we can label the highs and the lows as ceilings and floors. So from this point on in the video, when I talk about the ceiling or the floor, I'm talking about the high and the low, okay? So your personal ceiling is kind of like, in your behavior and in your psychology, it's almost like there's this glass ceiling where, you hit this point of you behaving in the right way, and you hit it and you just can't seem to go above it. And it's invisible, which is why it's a glass ceiling. But for some reason, you just can't seem to go beyond this point. And for, this could be like how much money you've got saved. This could be like how healthy you are, how good you feel, etc., etc. And your personal ceiling is the best version of yourself you can currently achieve in accordance with how good you think you can be. Simply put, going beyond this point would mean behaving in a way that accomplishes a reality incongruent with part of your identity or a core belief. So the key here is realizing that you've built your paradigm, worldview, and identity and belief systems around this being the best version of you. For example, when I used to smoke and I'd try and quit smoking and go through this cycle, I believed that my ceiling was, I'd be like, it's like day 4, like I'm probably going to give in now and I'm probably going to start smoking again because I am a smoker and it's day 4 and I haven't smoked for ages, so I'll pick it up again. And you tell yourself all these beliefs and these stories, and really your ceiling is just as high as you believe it to be. Now there are limits to this because you have a body and you have a mind, and those things come with natural limits, and there's only so much cortisol and stress and energy depletion that you physically can take before you burn out and start tapering off down the negative spiral. But most of the time there's probably a lot more efficiency that you could be getting out of yourself. Like, your ceiling right now from a behavioral perspective, from a discipline perspective, is probably maybe 20%, 30%, 40%, maybe 50% of what it actually could be. So there's a lot of leverage here in raising this ceiling and trying to squeeze more juice from the fruit. And when it comes to some ceilings, like it's infinite. Like for example, like with how much money I want to have saved, like you could that doesn't require any discipline, or well, it does, right? But it doesn't require anything from your body. It doesn't require any sort of like, saving money isn't exactly taxing or exhausting on the central nervous system. Like for example, if you're going to the gym and you do like 7 workouts in a row, full body 2-hour-long workouts, and you push yourself to failure every set, then you're going to burn out your central nervous system and you're going to mess with your entire body, and your body will just force you to rest, right? But when it comes to the intangible stuff like meditating, or reading, or saving money, or keeping a clean work environment, that doesn't really require any bodily function, right? So those ceilings are very, very high. So the ceiling manifests in many different ways in the different areas of your life, like how much money you make, the cleanliness of your apartment, etc., etc. And on the flip side, we have the personal floor. And your personal floor is like, you won't go below this point. This is the lowest point that you can go and tolerate before you bounce back up. And your personal floor is basically you at your worst, right? It's the worst version of yourself that you can accept. This is what we would call a hygiene standard, and you never ever break it. So when I say hygiene standard, like your personal floor is kind of like, hygiene's an easy example because you probably take your personal hygiene quite seriously, or at least I bloody hope you do. And there's things that you would do with your hygiene, with your personal hygiene, that you wouldn't tolerate not doing them. Like it's a hygiene standard. So like for example, let's say that you had just handled like loads of raw chicken. You're washing your hands. Like that's a hygiene standard. There's no way in hell that you don't. Or maybe you're just a filthy animal, I don't know. Or like, let's say for example that you've just been to the toilet and it hasn't been the best toilet experience, right? After you've eaten something bad, you're washing your hands. These are hygiene standards, things that you just do without thinking about it, that you would never ever ever think to not do. Like if I handled raw chicken and there wasn't a sink nearby, then I would search far and wide to find a way to wash my hands, and I wouldn't do anything or touch anything until I had washed my hands, right? And so the point I'm making here is you already have certain behaviors and certain things in your life that are just these standards for you, and you would never not do them, like brushing your teeth in the morning or going to the dentist. Although I know a lot of people that haven't been to the dentist in like 10 years, which is crazy to me, but whatever. So going beyond your personal flaw would mean tolerating a situation or a bit of reality that is really just intolerable. Because dipping below this would mean manifesting a reality that is out of alignment with your current sense of self or belief system. So you're starting to probably get the feeling here, you're probably onto something, that the key to this whole oscillation thing is your beliefs and, you know, your identity. Because your ceiling and the highest version of you that you can imagine, well, it's kind of clues in the name. It's the highest version of you that you can imagine. It's you, it's your identity, it's your self-image, right? And so when you tell yourself like, oh, you know, this is my high, like, it's a belief. That's all it is it's a statement of perceived truth about you. And your behavior aligns to your belief. The behavior is not the problem, it's just the belief that that's the high. And so, you know, this can happen unconsciously, but let's take the cleanliness of your apartment and how organized you are with your drawers and your clothes and your food and everything and how you eat and everything. You know, you have all sorts of self-image beliefs to do with those things, and you just believe that the ceiling is a certain way. But the same thing is true with the floor. So if I let's say that I covered your hands right now in dog shit. I know that's pretty not a very nice thing to think about, but on the topic of hygiene standards, let's say that I just throw a dog shit and you catch it. Your belief is should be, if you're a normal functioning human, your belief should be, that's disgusting and I need to go and wash my hands. And so what do? You act that out. You behave it. It's called praxis. You give assent to belief through action. Because you believe that having dog shit on your hands is disgusting, you take action to fix it. And the same thing happens with your personal flaws everywhere else in your life. So for example, if you believe that having £5,000 is a really small amount of money, and that £5,000 is like a panic number for you, and that you just believe that £5,000 is just way too low, then you start behaving differently and your behavior magically fixes. It's so fascinating. Like, people focus on their behavior and they focus on trying to like do the right thing and behave the right way. But what they don't realize is that their behavior is simply just upstream of their beliefs. And so if you want to fix your behavior, you just raise your standards. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a second. And we call it flipping the floor, where you basically just tell yourself that your lowest point, it needs to be higher, you know, because suddenly if you start changing the way that you see these things and you start changing your beliefs, then your behavior automatically corrects. And often, instead of focusing on trying to do the right thing and trying to behave and act in the right way, you just need to shift your belief about the thing you're acting about, and then suddenly you'll start changing, and this thing just magically, like whoosh, like your average state just 10x's. Some examples of your personal flaw might include how messy you tolerate things, how late it gets at night before you think I should sleep now. Like, you know, like when I used to be in my rut, like I'd be going to bed like 2 a.m. And for me, past 2 a.m, I was like, no, it's way too late. Like, I can't go to sleep past 2 a.m. Like, my belief, the way that I identified with the time at night was that going to bed after 2 a.m. was just simply intolerable. And so guess what would happen? As soon as 2 a.m. rolled around, in my lowest low point, as soon as 2 a.m. rolled around, I would go to sleep. And that was my personal flaw. That was my hygiene standard for sleep. That was me at my worst. My perception of this was 2 a.m. is anything beyond that is awful. In the same way that if you threw dog poo at me and I caught it with my hands, I'd go and wash my hands immediately. As soon as it's 2 a.m., I'm going to sleep immediately. It doesn't matter what I'm in the middle of. You know, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't matter anything. I'm going to bed, right? So pretty simple. So in other words, you have beliefs about yourself and your reality that not only limit how high you can climb and how consistently you can maintain your good point, but also limit how far you can fall. And basically, it's kind of like these beliefs, they ultimately become your ceiling, which is you at your best, and they become your floor, which is you at your worst. And so what happens is, you kind of have this like, it's like a thermostat, it's like a thermometer in your brain for your behavior, and it's like a thermometer of two adjacent parallel beliefs, where you've got you at your best, you at your worst, and all you're doing is oscillating between these two things. And when you believe things are a little bit too good, and when you believe that things can't really get better, and that when you believe like, oh, I've been doing this for so long, so now I deserve this, which is typically what would happen with like diet, right? It's like, oh, I've been eating so clean for like a week now, so I'm just gonna have one cheat meal. That's a perfect example of a ceiling, is the idea of a cheat meal. It's like, oh, I've been disciplined all week, I've eaten so clean all week, so like, because of that, like, I deserve a cheat meal. That's a belief system. It's a statement of perceived truth to do with self-image. Like, I can't go more than 6 days without eating junk food, because if I try and go more than 6 days without eating junk food, then I'm going to break and eat loads of junk food. That's the cope. That's the excuse people use for cheat meals. It's bollocks. It's bullshit. I've had clean carnivore runs where I've only eaten steak and eggs for sometimes 4 or 5 months. You don't need cheat meals. You just think you do. It's just this fucking bullshit belief system that you've built into your brain. And in the same way that, I've got 10,000, this is me, right? I've got 10,000 pounds in my bank now, which means that I deserve to buy something because I've worked really hard and I deserve these clothes, and bollocks, bullshit. It's a facade. It's just this belief. It's not real. You just make these little weird statements up and you cling on to them, and then you basically use them as pinpoints for behavior. Bollocks. It's all rubbish. All of this is bullshit. And then the same thing applies to your personal flaws, right? So the saving grace to this is, you'll get to a certain point and then you'll believe like, oh shit, I can't really let this get any worse. Like for me, my belief was that going to bed past 2 a.m. was like devil's work, or £5,000 meant I was poor. Objectively, both of those things may or may not be true, but it was true for me. And so I would oscillate my behavior back up. And so here we're building up, taking action, making progress, feeling good and taking control. Here we're taking responsibility, facing the pain, doing the work. And this is where you feel your best, right? When you're, making progress and developing. And then what would happen is I'd get to this point where I'd feel accomplished and proud. And, this is basically like my limit. I used to think this was burnout, but here, at this point, what was motivation and determination would manifest into pride and comfort, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm the man, and I'm like, I deserve this little break, or I deserve this thing, and then I'd start destroying it, and then I'd start taking no action, or more commonly doing the opposite thing that I needed to do to build up. I'd tear things down, break habits, avoid work, procrastinate, late nights, drinking, etc., etc. And then what I'd do is I'd hit this sort of rock bottom, and then I'd get really angry. And you're probably familiar with the anger, right? You know how that works when you get to this low point and you actually get furious at yourself, and then you start building it back up. The key to this puzzle is pain, and basically tracking the level of pain you experience at different points. Because, the interesting thing about the oscillations is really, at first principle, the thing that is indisputable about this, that sits at the root of every oscillation you have, is your emotion. Because what we're oscillating between are emotional states, and we have emotional thresholds. So a threshold is basically like an idea for something that you, like, once you breach a threshold, something happens. And so, for example, we have emotions up here of being comfortable. And what will happen is there'll become a threshold of comfort where you're so comfortable that you stop doing the things you need to do. And, up here you're in no pain. And then, there comes a threshold of comfort and a threshold of pride where you just stop trying. And the same thing is true when you hit your personal flaw, is you'll get angry, and you'll start being a little bit angry, a little bit more, and then what will happen is you'll produce so much acetylcholine, which I think is don't quote me on this, but that's the chemical that you produce when you're angry, and you'll produce so much of this emotion that you can't bear to be angry anymore, and you don't want to be any angrier, and you sort of, you hit this point of no return, and then, ultimately you start working again, and you're in real pain down here. And, just after you hit your floor, then you start feeling motivated and determined. And what happens is your determination and motivation gets to a certain point and then turns into comfort, and then you repeat the cycle. And this is basically what really, like, the first principle of this is, it's just your emotional state. And for me, like, I was able to label these emotions, and this might be different for you, right? So instead of feeling anger, like the thing that I'd feel at the bottom here was anger. But what you might feel at the bottom here is shame or guilt or depression, right? It doesn't, the emotion, the negative neurotic emotion that picks you up and pushes you back up here could be completely different to me. And the same thing is also true with the top. So when I get to the top, I start feeling proud and I start feeling comfortable. So the emotions that I feel is this sense of safety and this sense of like pride and this sense of relaxation. And those are the emotions that, they feel very good. So you naturally want to feel them, which is why this rut happens. But at the top here, you could feel all sorts of different emotions. Maybe you could feel like guilty because you feel like you don't deserve this success. Or maybe you start feeling doubt and fear because you're like, oh, I can't possibly sustain this, right? So my emotional cycle would basically be one of anger, drive, pride, and comfort. And what would happen is these emotions would, and do sometimes, they don't, to be fair, I've cracked this, I don't really do this anymore, I'm very consistent now, but these emotions, they would cycle and they'd merge into each other. And so, once again, anger, drive, pride, and comfort, yours could be completely different. At your bottom, you could have anxiety, and then anxiety could turn into, I don't know, probably motivation, right? But then your motivation could turn into like, guilt. And then your guilt could turn into like doubt. And then you could be anxious again, right? So basically, if I started in a rut, I'd get really angry. And that anger would trigger me to start acting. Because the key to understanding the idea of emotion is, if you think about the word, it's emotion. Motion is the key word, action, motion. So motion means to move. And so what emotions do is they force the body to move and behave and start, exercising calorific potential to make a change. And so when you have an emotion, what your body's trying to do is get you to do something. And an emotion is usually an indication that you need to do some sort of action to, escape some sort of situation. Not always, right? But you get the point. And so I'd be angry and I'd start acting and doing things. I'd be really pissed off at myself that I'd let myself get to this point. So the anger would kick in. And then what would happen is, negative emotions, you really do have thresholds here. Like, there's only so much anger or guilt or shame or fear or doubt or comfort or pride. Like, your brain will never let yourself get too emotional because, you'll hit a threshold. And your threshold for anger could be higher or lower than mine, right? But either way, the anger would basically morph and shift into drive and motivation. So the interesting thing about this emotional cycle is it's not like these are binary states. They are transitional, right? And so what that means is I'd be really angry, but then I wouldn't just wake up one day and be motivated. It would like the anger would seep into motivation. And at the beginning, I'd be like pissed off but driven, and then I'd be less pissed off but more driven until I was completely driven, and then I'd start climbing up. So the anger is what would get me started and sort of kickstart the engine of my motivation. And then what would happen is I'd do the right stuff, and the drive or the motivation, this feeling of drive, like, oh, I've got to do it, I've got to grind, I've got to hustle, I've got to lock in, bro. What would happen is I'd start becoming proud. And, it wasn't a binary switch, like I woke up one morning like I'm proud. It was a transition. And, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit good about myself. And I'm not really angry anymore. And I'm relaxed and I'm calm and I'm proud and I'm comfortable. I'm feeling comfortable. And pride felt good, and it would quickly turn to comfort. So this sort of would happen where I'm proud, and then I'd become comfortable. And this is where I'd start hitting my peak. Really, this is where like I've got the money in the bank that I wanted to have, or I'm making a certain amount of money a month, or I feel a certain way. And then I then just stopped doing it. I'd stop behaving properly because I was comfortable, and there was no negative emotion, pushing me, or I was in no pain. And Then I'd stop behaving properly and just let everything drop and start slipping again. And then, that comfort would turn to anger, and then the cycle would repeat. And I was at the mercy of this cycle for years. Even when I was making 7 figures, I was still struggling with this thing. So the cool thing about this is you can still make pretty, good progress whilst experiencing this. But let me tell you, I would have got here so much faster and with so much less pain had I cracked this earlier. And I truly had these two sides. I had the productive, disciplined Charlie and the lazy, destructive, apathetic Charlie. I'd build and destroy, grow and shrink. It was agony. But one day, after years of meditating on this problem, I finally cracked it and I actually figured out how to break this cycle. Because in my life, I don't go through this anymore. To a degree, slightly. There might be ups and downs in my life where, for example, I might do some hardcore program recording for 3 weeks, and then I might need 2 or 3 days to just sort of watch nature documentaries or read biographies and just lounge around and do nothing and fast for a day or two. But that's a pretty good floor. My floor at the moment for my diet is eating a salad. And I'm not even joking, right? Because I've been on this carnivore diet, which is where you only eat meat for a year and a bit, right? And for me, the lowest possible thing that I can tolerate is eating a chicken Caesar salad or eating a poke bowl, whatever the hell that thing's called. Just eating some leaves or even eating minced beef with salad stuff in it. That's my low point. That's what I feel guilty about, right? And so what I've been able to do is make my hygiene standard so extremely good that even when I'm doing what feels like the wrong thing or the bad thing or the naughty thing, I'm doing the right thing. And the same thing is true with my income. And for example, my personal flaw for the cleanliness of my apartment or my email inbox or my messages, it's kind of if my room's messy, it means that there's one t-shirt on the floor, and I can't possibly tolerate anything below that. And so what I've been able to do over the past couple of years is raise my personal floor and basically raise my standards to the point where, for example, a bad day of work for me would be 5 hours of focused work and then watching Netflix for half a day. That's a bad day. Waking up at 6 a.m., working for 4 or 5 hours, getting all the essentials done, and then, lounging off for the afternoon. I don't do that often, right? But that's a terrible day for me. That's the worst possible conceivable day. For you, the worst possible conceivable day could just be sitting in bed masturbating 100 times, right? I don't know what the hell you get up to on your rut days, right? But you know what I'm talking about. But I cracked it, and I really figured out how to crack this. And don't get me wrong, I still have little oscillations here and there, but my point there is my personal floor is ridiculously high. My personal floor for diet, for example, is probably way above your personal ceiling. So the worst thing that I could do for my diet, and I know the corollary to this is once or twice a year, I will have a week of extreme, letting everything go. So I'll have this holiday thing where I'll eat whatever I want and I'll eat ice cream, and I haven't fully escaped the personal floor, but those things are so insignificant because really it's 1 or 2 weeks out of 52 weeks. It's not, and sometimes I find I need to do that to give myself rest and let my mind, and that's not an excuse for you, but my point is that it should be so rare and so yeah, you get my point. But anyway, on an average day or month, my personal floor from a diet perspective, from a discipline perspective, from a habit perspective is probably miles above everybody else's personal ceilings. And that's how you massively raise your average state and massively, get rid of these things. So I've basically cracked this. I no longer go through this, but there is a week every now and then, once or twice a year, where I kind of have no choice because I get so burned out and so stressed and tired that I have to sort of give myself the free rein for lack of impulse, but whatever, right? So that was when I started paying attention to something. So the way that I cracked this and the way that I managed to figure this cycle thing out and actually resolve it forever was by paying attention to pain. And pain truly was the key to breaking the cycle, because when I was in the most pain, I took the most action and resisted the most impulses. And the pain would come when I was close to my floor. So I think we can all agree that the most painful point in your existence is the floor. And it's no surprise that when you are in the most pain, you take the most action. And at the top here, at the ceiling, this is when you're most comfortable. This is the least pain. And so when you're in the least pain, you have very little reason to act, and you have every reason to do the opposite thing because you're in no pain. And that's when you start slipping down. So when you're not in any pain, you slip. But when you're in lots of pain, you build. And so the real key to breaking this cycle is to look at pain. And I always thought that the way to break the cycle was to focus on the positive. So, I was so, focused on trying to raise my ceiling, and I was so focused on trying to just improve myself and better myself. But the real key to improving your average and breaking the cycle is the low point. It's far, your average is way more determined, and it might look like, it's the same thing because they're the same distance apart, but it's not true. The main thing that raises your average state and breaks the cycle is you at your worst. It's because the personal ceiling is pretty easy to fix. In terms of I just need to save the extra money. It's far less about the light side and trying to raise yourself up and focus on the positive. It's way more about the negative. You need to learn to focus on your dark side and this side of you that's in loads of pain. And I learned quickly I needed to focus on the painful negative and raise my floor. And so the point I'm making here, the real secret to breaking the cycle is forcing yourself to be in as much pain as humanly possible. That is the secret to this whole thing. You want pain. And that's a hard thing for people to accept because, who wants pain? But if you want to be an animal and break this cycle and make millions of dollars and change your life and change the world and live this insane lifestyle, did you think it was going to come without a cost? Did you think it was going to be this nice, pleasurable, fun activity? Hell no. You want what no one else has, which means you must pay the price no one else is willing to pay, which is the price of pain. So what you need to learn to do is put yourself in a state of near constant agony. And what that looks like is the example I gave you earlier, right? If I had a 3 or 4 day stint where I was eating salads every day, I would register that as really painful. I would feel guilty about that. And so my point is that you want to put yourself in pain. So let me give you an example with my financial savings, right? So let's say that you raise your ceiling from someone who makes 2K a month to 100K a month with the goal of becoming a millionaire. Let me show you why raising the ceiling doesn't work. Because the problem is you can increase how much money you save infinitely. So you could save millions of dollars. But if you don't regulate your downside, it doesn't matter because you're going to go back down to zero anyway. So, in the same thing with fitness, it doesn't matter how much weight you lose if you put it all back on later. So there's this show called The Biggest Loser, which is an American TV show about people losing weight. And on the Biggest Loser, what they do is, they'll do this big weight loss protocol, and all these fat people will lose lots of weight. And, they'll do an interview with them a couple of months later to see if they've kept the weight off or not. And most of the time, these people would just come back overweight and fat again. And that's because they didn't focus on the dark side, right? It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you don't lose. It's not about how much progress you make, it's about how much you do not regress. Because the light side, the ceiling, this positive energy side of making more and doing more and being more, that's actually quite easy to do. You'll be very surprised. Instead of focusing on trying to raise your ceiling, we just focus on raising the floor. Because when you raise the floor, what starts to happen is eventually your floor becomes your ceiling, and what was intolerable to you at the bottom, your ceiling course corrects itself. The high points, the peaks of your existence, that will naturally raise as you increase your floor. So we do not need to focus on this light positive side of building yourself up and being all happy. And no, we focus on the dark side. We focus on the pain. We focus on the shame, the guilt, the anger, and introducing as much of that as we can at the highest level at which we possibly can. And, it's the same thing with booking appointments for your business. You can book hundreds of calls this month, right? So an appointment is a scheduled time to discuss. It's like a sales call, right? So you're going to need to book sales calls, and I'm going to show you how to do this. And we've got lots of systems and easy on how to do this that I'm sure you'll use eventually as well. But you can book as many appointments as you want this month. But if you book none next month, then you're never going to achieve consistent business growth. So this is called flipping the floor. And this is the real practical solution to fixing this thing once and for all and forever, okay? So after years, and I really do mean years, of thinking about this problem and how to solve it and how to break the cycle, I've come to a very practical and straightforward conclusion. And that is that the way that you break the cycle is by flipping the floor, okay? So like I said, it really is all about your dark side, and it is all about the floor. We don't need to worry about the ceiling and increasing that, because we can, by just focusing on the dark side, the negative side, and increasing your lowest standards, the ceiling will correct itself, right? Understand, you do not become the best version of yourself you can imagine. No, instead you become your standards. These are the lowest versions of yourself you're willing to tolerate. So another example here of why it doesn't matter how good you are if you're just as bad, like you hear stories about people that win the lottery, and they'll win like a couple of $1 million or a couple of £1 million tax free, and they'll basically have all this money suddenly. But then what happens is a lot of people who win the lottery, they become depressed and they spend all this money and they buy too much crap and they become addicted to drugs, and like their life just goes down the bin. And that's a perfect example of the fact that it's not about your light side, it's about your dark side. Because if I gave you $1 million right now, with your current impulse control and your current financial management systems, you'd probably fuck it all up. The first thing you'd do is go and buy some supercar, and you might say to yourself, no, I wouldn't, I'd invested in real estate. Oh, fuck off, would you? Like, come on now. Like, let's be real and honest here for a second. If you were really just granted £1 million or $1 million dollars or pounds or euros in tax-free cash, you're telling me you're going to be able to resist the impulse to go and buy all of the status-driven objects that you so blatantly desire, which is why you want to make money in the first place? Come on. Like, let's be real for a second here, right? It's it's all about your dark side. We need to learn to manage your negative behavior and your impulses as opposed to your light side. Okay? So, flipping the floor. So your personal floor is basically your standard. Okay, so we talked earlier about the idea of it being a hygiene standard. Your standards are basically things that you will never dip below. So like, for example, for me when I was younger, it was £5,000, anything below that, and I'd panic. I couldn't possibly tolerate anything below that. Or going to bed after 2 a.m., right? You have behavioral standards, and you really do. Like, for example, for me, in business at the moment, my lowest standard is like 800 grand in a month. Or 900 grand in a month. If I dip below that number, I am freaking the fuck out. Like I am panicking. That's my standard, right? And your standards represent themselves and manifest through your emotions. So when you start triggering your anger or your shame or your guilt or your fear, like when you start getting really emotional and panicky, that's a sign that you're breaching your standards or are getting close to breaching your standards. And the intensity of the emotion you feel is determined by how close you are or how far you've breached your standards, right? And you have standards, you really do. But we need to focus on these standards. The key to breaking this cycle and flipping the floor is the standards, and basically changing these, because your standards determine your action, right? Because remember, the action that you take, like the positive action comes, the thing that builds you up and gets you to your ceiling comes after your floor. And the reason that you bounce back from this floor is because you get close to breaching this standard, or you breach the standard, you start panicking, and then you start working. And so what we need to do is simulate your floor as often as we can at a higher point. And we raise this floor, and as we raise this floor, and we every time we come down to this painful level, we bounce back. And if you can have a really high floor, like for example, my floor right now is $800,000 in a month. So if I dip below that, I'm freaking the fuck out in the same way that I freaked the fuck out when I had £5,000 in my bank account. It's the same psychological thing. Like, I'll get angry, I'll get terrified, I'll be on the edge of my seat, like making 800 grand. So the thing about successful people that no one understands is they just have really, really high standards. And that's all you have to do is learn how to raise the floor, just raise your standards. Because now, if I make 700 grand in a month, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm terrified. I'm beside myself with fear, which means that my negative emotional cycle commences when I hit 8 figures. Anything below that I'd be like, what the hell am I doing? It's the same thing as like not washing my hands if I had dog shit on them. Like, I couldn't possibly tolerate it, right? So you have standards everywhere in your life. A standard is like an unconscious mental checkpoint. It's a threshold for emotion. As soon as you go below it, bang, you're into action, you're into work. And so if we can learn to raise this and have it as high as humanly possible, then you can start to really make some progress, because suddenly what you would want becomes your standard. This is really cool. I'm going to explain something to you in a second, right? So you have standards everywhere in your life, from what you'd eat to who you date. So, you probably have standards for who you date. Maybe in terms of how attractive someone is, or, like, for example, a standard of mine would be if I was dating someone and I found out they were addicted to cocaine or they were addicted to heroin. I don't care how attractive they are or how amazing they are. That's a standard of mine. Not going to happen. I'm sorry, but I'm not dating a drug addict, because I know far too well what happens to people who do that and what that does to you. Not going to happen. I don't care if she's a 10 out of 10 goddess sent from heaven itself. If she's, doing drugs all the time and that's been a pattern of her life for the last couple of years, it's over. It's not happening. I don't care how fit you are, in the same way that, like, what I'd eat. Like, a standard for me is like, I would never just like if I randomly had the impulse now to order like some massive pizza with loads of sauce and stuff, I'm not going to do it. It's just a standard. Like, I can't comprehend doing that. My identity is so far away from that, and it's just not going to happen. Not going to happen. Like, like for me, I wouldn't order like a pizza right now, and you probably wouldn't just sit and eat a bag of sugar. So if you think about this, you have standards, they're just low, right? So like if you've got like you get like cooking sugar, like caster sugar, like a standard of yours when it comes to your health is you probably wouldn't just eat a kilogram of sugar right now, right? Pretty simple. Or for example, like with me, I would never do cocaine. I've never touched cocaine in my life, never touched any sort of class A, class B drug or anything like that. And so like, if someone offered me cocaine right now, I'd be like, there's no way. It's so far away from my identity, and my standard is I wouldn't smoke weed. Hell, I don't even really drink anymore. So it's kind of like, yeah, you get the point. So you want to know what your standards are, and you do not need to look any further than your personal flaws. So this is kind of why earlier on, it's really important that you actually do this action item. And you should have these, oscillation trackers in front of you right now, because, you want to make a note of, all of them, maybe 10 if you can. And then you want to look at your personal flaw and you want to be like, oh, that's my standard. And once you look at this thing, like, your standard determines the quality of your life. And so, we need to understand it. Pun not intended, right? Stand. Okay, where were we? So, to break the cycle, we don't want to set a goal for our behavior or self-image. And this sounds really counterintuitive. It's like, what the hell? Like, well, all we've talked about so far is goal and identity and stuff. But instead of looking at our goal as a goal, as this thing that we're going to strive towards and, live up to and dream about, we want to set it as a standard. This is the secret. A standard is something you simply don't break or breach. Like brushing your teeth in the morning. You probably wouldn't eat a 6-month-old slice of bread. And you probably wouldn't just roundhouse kick an elderly woman. These are standards of behavior that you just would never do. You have standards for all areas. Humans do not tolerate situations that they believe are intolerable, and we don't behave in ways that break our own personal standards. You do not strive towards the good, you strive away from the bad. In other words, we don't progress to our best self imaginable, we regress to our worst self that is intolerable or unacceptable, right? Or acceptable or tolerable. This is the key. We do not get what we want, we get what we tolerate. So you don't achieve your goals, you achieve your standards. Just let that sink in for a quick second here. We do not become the highest version of ourselves which we can imagine, we become the lowest version of ourselves which we can accept. The key to breaking this cycle then is to set a new standard so that the version of yourself you want to be is actually the worst version of yourself you could possibly tolerate. In other words, you make your current best your new worst. And this is called flipping the floor. And what this basically means is right now, you see your goal or your dream reality as something that would register on a very nice emotional level. If you were making 10K a month, you'd be happy, you tell yourself. But what I need you to do is I need you to tell yourself that if you were making 10K a month, you'd be miserable as sin. Because what needs to happen is this perception you have of this goal, it needs to stop being this thing that you strive towards in this happy-go-lucky way, and it needs to become the lowest thing you could possibly accept. So for me, my goal was to make 800 grand in a month, but what I did is I set it as a standard. And I said, if I dip below that, or if I'm not making that, I am a piece of shit and I hate my life and I hate myself and I'm so angry and furious at myself. And so what starts to happen is this is hard to do, but remember, the key to this whole thing is pain. And your personal flaw is when you're in the most pain, which is when you take the most action. So what we want to do is flip the floor, where what we do is we take your personal ceiling, which is where you feel happy and good right now, and we make your new floor your ceiling. So for example, if for me, my personal financial situation was the 10 and 5,000 pound thing, I would feel good and comfortable at 10,000 pounds. But what I need to do is when I get to 10,000 pounds, is I need that to register on the same emotional level that 5,000 pounds would. And so what we do is we just switch them around. And so let me show you a diagram, because this will make this really clear. This is how most people live, right? Where they have a strong fluctuation between two versions of themselves. Sometimes, they'll have a little marginal increase, So this might be you, where your life is getting a little bit better, slowly. But you're not really making drastic progress, but maybe you're getting like a little bigger in the gym, you're saving a little bit of money. You might be making a little bit of marginal progress, right? Where you're oscillating between two things, but the average trend is upwards because your strong side is better than your downside. So when your positive side is prevailing, you will make a little bit of progress. But because you still have the floor, it's not that great. But a lot of people in life, they see a marginal decrease in average. And this is where you're getting poorer, or you're getting into more debt, or you're getting fatter, or you're losing faith, whatever, right? So most people, they exist in one of these three states. Either they stay the same and they plateau, where you're just meeting your average and you're not really making any progress, or you're making a little bit of progress, but it still is very painful. And it's still, you're still going through this horrible up and down, or even worse, you're decreasing, and you're not decreasing drastically, but your life's just getting a little bit shittier day by day. That's how most people live. But this is how the A players do it, and this is what I figured out how to do. So what happens is you hit a plateau, right, like this, where you're just bouncing between these two states. But then, what happens, if the floor here is $2,000 in the bank, what you can learn to do is switch this. So let's say your floor is 2K in the bank and your ceiling is 10K in the bank. And down here is we're just oscillating between these two things financially. Well, what happens if you want to make drastic change and experience exponential growth in your life? What you do is you basically make your lowest standard your goal. And so what this would look like, this example given here, if I just zoom in and I'll just show you. So here, this is kind of what I did, is your new lowest standard becomes what your ceiling was previously. And this is called flipping the floor, where your floor becomes your ceiling. So your old old ceiling becomes your new floor. And so new lowest standard, 10K in the bank, no matter what, anything less than this is tolerable. Previous ceiling is now the new floor. So what we have down here is a $2,000 floor and a $10,000 ceiling. But what we then do instead is we switch our perception and our belief systems of the ceiling, and we now tell ourselves that $10,000 is the worst possible thing that we could imagine. And so we start registering $10,000, and you can see this here because the level of $10,000 is here, but we start registering it as our new floor. And that's all you have to do, is just rewire your perception of what you think is good to the worst possible thing imaginable. And what happens then naturally, if you increase your floor to your prior ceiling, so if you're, this gets a bit confusing to explain, right? But I think you're tracking along here. When your old ceiling becomes your new floor, you automatically course correct a new ceiling, and you'll start oscillating again. So, if the floor originally here is 2K in the bank, and the ceiling is 10K in the bank, then what we need to do is take this ceiling and make it the new floor. And that's how you get this exponential up curve. And that's how you basically, you can see this, the dotted line here, sort of scaling up. That's how you increase your average. That's how you suddenly go from having, an average of $6,000 in the bank to, an average of like $20,000 in the bank, right? And this is how A players do it. And so, what happens is you do it again. Because you're a goal-striving animal, what happens is a new ceiling will naturally manifest. This is why you don't have to worry about the ceiling. Just focus on the floor. Just focus on the negative, dark side and the pain, and making yourself angry and shameful and guilty at your current ceiling. So here's the thing right now. You have a ceiling for your behavior. You have a limit. And when you hit that ceiling, you feel good. What you need to do now is when you hit that ceiling, you need to force yourself to hate yourself for hitting that ceiling. You need to get to that point where you usually experience bliss and comfort and think, fucking hell, is that it? That is awful. That's the worst. I'm never dipping below this again. I'm here and this is terrible. This absolutely sucks. This is awful. I can't believe I've only got this. God, is that it? Terrible, awful. Right now, let's say that your ceiling is going to bed at midnight, right? And you get to midnight, and you're like, it's the earliest time you go to bed, right? And that's when you start feeling good. What you need to start doing if you want to go to bed earlier, if this is your goal, is to go to bed earlier and sleep better, then as soon as midnight rolls around, tell yourself you hate yourself. Like, why the hell am I going to bed this late? This is awful, blah, 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 right? Same thing with your diet. So let's say that you've had you've done your, you're getting up to your cheat meal, and you've done your 6 days of clean eating, and where you usually start feeling, happy and proud and like you're deserving of a cheat meal, no. Get rid of that emotion and start saying, I've only done 6 days. What the hell am I talking about? I don't deserve a cheat meal. What a dickhead. That pissed me off. I can't believe I've only done 6 days. And that's how you fix your behavior, you need to be in pain. You won't do anything. You won't take any action. You won't make any positive change if you're not in pain. And so we need to register your ceiling as painful. And your ceiling, your current ceiling, needs to become your new floor. So next time you hit it, and next time you're up there, be like, fucking hell, this is awful. I hate this. I'm in so much pain, and I'm furious at myself for being here. And what will happen when you do that is you'll create a new ceiling, because this oscillation is a law of nature. It has to exist. And for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction, right? So when you raise your floor, you naturally raise your ceiling. The ceiling takes care of itself. You don't need to raise the ceiling. You don't need to think about it. You just need to focus on the dark side and the negative side, okay? And then a new average will be created, right? And by raising the floor, we increase the average, which is pretty obvious. And then we do it again. So, what will happen is, you'll flip the floor, you'll raise your standards, you'll increase your average, which could be your income or your health or whatever, or your business success, and you'll start bouncing and oscillating between two things again, and you'll experience the exact same emotions and the exact same pattern all over again, but the only difference is this time you'll be healthier, or you'll be richer, or you'll be better, right? The emotional pattern, it goes away after, but once you've done this like 10, 15 times, you become smart and you sort of transcend the oscillation, right? And this happened to me after putting up with this and thinking about it and working on it for like a few years. Like after like 3, 4, 5 years of this, like you really do just transcend this, and you just become way better. I mean, you can still kind of bounce between points a little bit, right? Like I still bounce between revenue points in my business and, you know, stuff like that. But on a personal level, from a health perspective and stuff, like I've got it fucking dialed. Like I do not struggle with these ups and downs anymore, right? But that's because I've got so much practice in doing it. So once you flip the floor enough, like, you know, like there comes a point when it comes to like health and diet and fitness and discipline and habits where like you achieve a point of optimal efficiency. And there's always more juice to squeeze from the fruit when it comes to your personal life and, you know, making yourself healthier and stuff. But, you know, there comes a point of diminishing returns where you can only sleep so well or eat so well or be so disciplined before you start getting adverse effects, right? Where you end up doing weird shit and focusing too much on it and you don't get enough reward for what you do. But you're probably like 3-4 years away from getting to that point, so I wouldn't worry for now, right? But basically, A players, and what I like to do is consistently raise the new floor. So you're oscillating, and then, you know, you hit a floor, and then at this critical point here, so the crucial point that I'm pointing to is here. So usually what would happen at this point is you'd start getting comfortable and proud because you've reached your ceiling again. But if you can get to this point and just conjure up the discipline and the willpower to say, this is fucking awful. Like, I can't believe that I used to get proud and comfortable and happy here. This is terrible. I'm so angry at myself. And then you'll keep going. And then you'll be like, then you'll just break through and have this new height. And then what will happen is, you know, you'll hit a ceiling. You will, right, naturally, because you kind of have to. And then what will happen is you'll regulate back down. But what will happen, instead of you regulating back down to the low point you were at before, because you registered this as a terribly painful, you'll bounce back to that point. You might regress a little bit below, but the point is we've raised the floor. We're raising the floor, and by doing so, we raise the ceiling. And then you'll oscillate again and again and again. And then after a while, you'll become wise to it, and you'll find your new ceiling. And when you hit that new ceiling, bang, this is awful. I hate myself. I'm angry. I'm in pain. And you'll break it again, and then again. And then what will happen, and what happened to me in my income, is sometimes you'll push through the ceiling, right? And you'll push the ceiling so much that you'll just go exponential with this shit. So for me, like with my income, you know, I was like making like, you know, let's take the first year in business. So I would oscillate between making 10K a month and like 3K a month. 10K a month, 3K a month, 10K a month, 3K a month, 10K a month, 3K. And you know, this isn't perfectly representative, right? Because I'd have like maybe 2-3 10K months, and then like a month where I do like 4K, and then like 3K, and then like 2K, and then like 11K. But you know, I'd oscillate between 10K and 3K on average, right? And then like I basically broke through, and I had a month where I did like, you know, the first month I broke through this sort of 10K, 11K average cycle. I did like $30,000, and then, you know, suddenly I wouldn't go below 10K in a month. And so I started bouncing between 30K and 10K. And then what happened is I was like, oh, I've hit this 30K ceiling. So then I broke it again and I hit 50K. And then 30K became my new floor. So I bounced between 50K and 30K. And then the big thing happened where like I suddenly went from making I made 50K in a month, and I was like, this sucks. This is awful. I can do better than this. I'm angry at myself. And then bang, I shot up to like 150K in a month. And then like, you know, and what happened is I overshot my ceiling so much that my new floor became like 100K. And so, you know, it took me, I mean, this was a journey of a couple of years, right? But once you flip the floor a couple of times, you can just fucking decide like, I am never going below this point. And let me tell you something right now, like my floor is like 8 figures. If I hit $100,000 in a month, I think I'd end it all. Like I can't even, which is insane because 100K a month used to be my be all end all dream goal. But for me now, it's not even, I can't even tell you, like that would be the worst possible conceivable outcome for me. That's like, oh, that makes me feel so horrible. And I know to you that's insane to understand because you're like, well, what the hell? Like that's 100K in a month. That's ridiculous money. But to me, that's so little, and I'd rather, I'd vomit on that. Like I really would. That's like, for you right now, 10K a month might be the goal. You want to make 6 figures, right? Instead of looking at 6 figures as this pedestal goal of nirvana, start looking at it as this disgusting, awful thing that you can't believe that you're not even there yet. Dude, if I hit 10K in a month, I think I'd like start committing self-harm or something. And I know that sounds like this off the cuff stupid remark, but I'm not even joking. Like that is, I'd rather die. Like I really would, man. Like it's crazy what happens to your standards. Like how you feel about your lowest point right now is how I would feel about like 800K a month. And I know that that's so hard to empathize with and understand, but you'll get this as you become successful and push on and do the action items and the training, and whether you decide to keep going with this business, which I'm sure you will, you'll get it one day. In like 2-3 years from now, you'll look back and you'll be at like multi-6 or 7 figures, or multi-7 figures even, and you'll look back and be like, yeah, I get it. I understand what he was talking about. I didn't get it at the time, but I do now. Trust me, it'll happen, right? So, where were we? So yeah, this is kind of like what I just described, right? Not quite the same numbers I gave you earlier, but you get the point. Up and down, up and down, up and down, bang. Up and down, up and down, up and down, bang. Up and down, up and down, up and down, bang. And then you just, you're off. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm just reflecting here for a personal second, because like I figured this stuff out like 7 years ago, and now that I look back, it is actually insane like how like I'm teaching this stuff to you as someone who's actually done it and seen it work. Like this isn't some theory, like this is literally what I did and the perception I took to do it. I know this works. And the reason I know it works is because I can track my income and pictures of myself and my emotional state and all my data. Like, fucking hell, I actually did it. Which is an interesting point of reflection, because you never really stop to think about these things. Anyway, I'm glad to be part of the knowledge with you. So there's the theory of floor flipping. I've done it lots of times. The key is pain. You need to register your best as your worst, and the best version of yourself you can currently act out needs to become the worst, most painful thing imaginable. So like, I've kind of explained this point here of where my floor is at the moment. The floor I used to have in business a year or two ago was 500K a month, and the ceiling was 700K a month. And I bounced between these two numbers for a long time and plateaued, and the average income of my business was 600K a month. So if I'd hit 500K in a month, I'd get depressed and anxious and angry and start working really hard to get me back to that 700K mark. And 700K felt good. It made me feel happy and proud. And the comfort would set in, I'd slump back down again, right? So what I had to do to break this plateau was to have a 700K month and emotionally force myself to register this on an extremely painful level. I started seeing 700K a month as a disgusting, awful outcome that I simply couldn't tolerate. In the same way that I wouldn't skip brushing my teeth for a week, I couldn't stand making 700K in a month. Awful. After I did this became a new floor, and I never looked back. And these days, if I made, I say 600, honestly, if I made like anything below 8 figures, like I'd be on the edge of my seat, terrified and full of fear. 7 years ago, that number was $600. Like, it's so funny how this stuff works, right? But the summary of this point is to make your goal your lowest standard, okay? So now that we've really talked about flipping the floor, we need to, I want to really just dig deep and really get to the bottom of this for you, because you understand the theory of this, and you'll probably get pretty far with the theory. But really, I want to just talk about this thing called component epiphany. And basically, this is the nuts and bolts of how we actually flip the floor. Because the way we flip the floor is by inducing epiphanies. So an epiphany is a sudden or great realization, a drastic, immediate shift in paradigm. Oh, and you guessed it, it's all about your belief systems, right? It's been the theme of this mindset training for the last couple of days now. And so the way that we induce an epiphany is by using your belief systems, right? Okay. If you're oscillating in life or a specific area of life, it's because of certain beliefs you hold about the thing in question. So now that you have a thorough understanding of beliefs and how they work from the previous training, we can actually start attacking them and taking some action here. So this process doesn't just break the oscillation cycles you experience, but will also dig you out of struggle too. So sometimes you're not even oscillating, you're just flatlining. So, let's say that you've been trying to make this business work for a year and you haven't made any money yet. You know, it's kind of like you're not even oscillating because you haven't even started yet, right? So sometimes you're just flatlining, but you know, whatever. If you're oscillating or struggling or stuck, whatever you're doing, the way that you solve this is with a belief epiphany. Okay? And that's pretty much it. So at this point in the training, you should understand that you are the sum of your beliefs. The self doesn't exist. It's just you clinging on to a perceived statements of truth about yourself, bundled together into this thing that you know as your identity. And your beliefs truly do define who you are. What we need to do is root out your beliefs so we can start getting to work on breaking them and rebuilding them. And this is a quote from Carl Jung, which pretty much summarizes this idea of beliefs and, you know, how they operate in the shadow of your psychology. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And that's a quote from Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So until you become aware of these belief systems and become cognizant and aware of what you actually believe to be true, you don't even know that it's guiding your life, right? So before we begin this action item, let me give you an example. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you a real life example and story of how I flipped the floor for outreach. So you're going to have to learn how to do this because basically any business needs customers and any B2B business needs business customers, or B2C business needs customers, right? And so what you're going to be doing to get clients and finding clients and closing deals and making money is something called cold outreach, which is where you use cold email, cold calling, and cold DMs to book sales calls, okay? And a massive struggle for loads of entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs for service-based businesses or consulting businesses, whether it's business to business or business to consumer, whether you're a coach, consultant, agency owner, whatever the hell, whatever you sell, a lot of people really struggle with outreach. And I was no exception to this. It is the biggest problem that everyone faces, which is why we have Easy Grow, which is a client acquisition program that teaches people how to do outreach, right? But my personal experience here, I'm going to explain it to you. So I had to flip the floor by changing my beliefs with outreach. So let me tell you a story. When I was starting my first agency, I really struggled with client acquisition, big time. I found it super hard to stay consistent with cold outreach. So I cold email, cold calling, cold DMs. I couldn't book appointments and get clients for the life of me. I kind of knew what worked a little bit, but I was so inconsistent and I couldn't make it work. And outreach got me so depressed that I didn't want to run my business anymore. I would do everything I could to put it off. I'd procrastinate and justify not doing the outreach. I had a ton of negative associations and beliefs to do with outreach. I was totally desperate. I manifested this desperation by trying to outsource outreach. I tried to get people to do it for me. I didn't want to do it myself. It never worked, and no one could make it work. It seemed impossible. Like, have you ever had a problem before in your life that just seems like impossible to solve? Well, that was me with outreach. I was also convinced that it was the copy. So I was like, oh, it's the script that I'm using for the cold calls, or it's the cold email copy that I'm using. And I was like, this is why it's not working. It's, you know, it's got to be the tool or the platform. You know, it's got to be the copy or the script. And I thought it was a simple business problem. And so the reason that I thought that this problem existed, you know, and the things that I blamed for this impossible outreach problem, I'd blame the market or the niche for not replying. I'd be like, oh, this market just, you know, cold outreach just doesn't work in my market. That's what I'd say. I blamed the copy or the script. So I'd be like, oh, it must be the reason this isn't working is because I'm not sending the right copy or I'm not using the right script. Or I'd blame the people who I'd hired. So I'd like try and hire appointment setters and they wouldn't make it work. And I'd be like, oh, they sucked and, you know, it was all their fault. But over time, for this outreach problem, I found the solution and I fixed it. And it's a good job I did because I'm going to teach you how to fix it as well later on down the line, right? After all, if I didn't fix it, I wouldn't be here today with the world-leading program on high-ticket acquisition. So it's kind of ironic. Like, I struggled with outreach for so long at the beginning of my journey, but now I'm so good at it that I'm the best in the world at teaching it. And Easy Grow is by far and wide the single best program for high-ticket business to consumer or business to business client acquisition. Like, there's nothing, it is nothing even comes close to how fucking good that thing is. when it comes to appointment booking, like from a cold outreach perspective or whatever. So how the hell did I go from not being able to book any appointments for myself to helping more than 3,500 marketing agency owners, coaching consultants systemize acquisition and actually solve the problem? Like, what the hell? How the hell does that happen? Well, I thought I needed a key. So like, what I was hunting for with this problem was the key. I was like, what's the secret? There's got to be just one thing. There's one thing that can just turn this problem around and make the problem go away. I was like, what's the key? I just need to hire the right person. I just need to find the right copy. I just need to find the right platform. I just need to find the right niche. I just was convinced there was just this one key, this one thing, this one beautiful, shiny object, this silver bullet that would just solve everything. And I struggled day and day and day until I had an epiphany. And this is why I'm teaching this to you now, because I know how to solve these issues. I call it the outreach epiphany. I had this epiphany, this sudden drastic paradigm shift that just struck me like lightning. And the epiphany started when I heard the following phrase from a mentor. Charlie, you don't have business problems. Business problems aren't what you think they are. They're personal problems in disguise. Entrepreneurs and people don't have business problems. They have personal problems that reflect in their business. So someone told me this and I was like, what? This was my reaction. You can imagine my reaction. I was like, what the fuck? I was thinking, how can my lack of clients and my appointments be pinned on me? How the hell can my personal problems have anything to do with my outreach and my struggle to get clients? What do I have to do with it? I was like, surely it's the script or the team members or the deliverability or the market or, whatever the hell. It's a business problem. How could it possibly be any of my personal issues? At this point in my life, I didn't think I had any personal issues. I was disciplined. I ate well. I was sleeping well. I didn't drink. I exercised. I wore blue light blockers, took cold showers. You name it, good habits, I did it. Now I oscillated between these habits, obviously, but I would be able to go like I said at the beginning, like 6 months sometimes of purely good habits and pure discipline. So what the hell was going on? Like, what the fuck? What personal problem could I possibly have that could be causing my business problem of no clients? My mentor was adamant. He was like Yoda. He was like, you'll figure it out. I was like, what the hell does that mean? I don't get it. I didn't get it. How the hell could my lack of results from outreach and my lack of clients be the result of my personal life? Surely I just needed the right copy and the right niche and I'd be good to go, right? Wrong. And I was blind. And then suddenly I had an epiphany. Like just out of nowhere, like bang. Like I woke up one day and I just realized. So what was this deep, dark personal issue? Well, you might have guessed it. It was my beliefs. So you don't have you don't have business problems. They aren't what you think. They're personal problems in disguise. People don't have business problems. They have personal problems that reflect in their business. And the personal problem that I was having was my belief systems. Specifically, my beliefs surrounding the component of reality called outreach. So you know how reality is broken down as these components, right? Tangible, intangible. You remember this from Achieving Omniscience. The component of reality in question was outreach. I was struggling big time with it. This could be anything. It could be weight loss. It could be your relationship with your parents. It could be your social life. It could be your love life. It could be your financial situation. Anything. But the component I was struggling with specifically was outreach. And the thing is I knew how to do outreach. Like I had the copy and I had the knowledge. So, I knew sort of like psychology and I knew a bit of copywriting and I knew how to book appointments every now and then. And I had some like proof of concept. I just didn't act consistently. The real issue behind why my outreach didn't work is I wasn't doing it consistently. And like what I would do is I'd test like a new piece of copy or something for like a couple of weeks. I'd do the work and be consistent with outreach for like 2-3 weeks. And then I'd just change it all and stop testing things and I'd be inconsistent. And I see this all the time with people who are just fucking impatient. And this was me. And I'm angry at myself, which is why I'm telling you not to do this. Like when you start outreach, it's going to suck and you're going to suck at it. But it's just something that you get better at. And you have to test your way to success. You'll remember from week 1 where we talked about iterative renaissance. And that, it's all about the scientific method and using tests and stuff. And there's more on this in Easy Grow, way more on this in Easy Grow and how to do tests and stuff. But what I do is I just stop. I'd give up. Like after 2 weeks, I'd make cold calls for like 2 weeks, book no calls, and be like, oh, like I just need to try something else. And I go and try like DMs. I never got good at anything, and I never found what worked because I was so inconsistent. Instead of being rational and patient and testing variables and iterating over time, I was just chaotic and a complete emotional mess. My follow-up game was inconsistent. I didn't do the work. I didn't test properly. I didn't track properly. I'd go 4 days consistently without error, and then I'd start messing around, screwing up my outreach test. I'd trail off or get shiny object syndrome. I'd switch niche. I'd switch service. I'd switch platform. I'd switch copy, anything. I was just this chaotic weirdo just bouncing between different things and ideas. And it was the most painful thing ever. 1 month I'd crush it. And like I figured out how to do the outreach thing. Like, you know, sometimes I'd get clients and I'd get appointments, but then the next month I just reset to zero and get absolutely nothing. Like it was weird. Like, you know, I was oscillating. Like sometimes I'd book appointments, sometimes I'd book none, sometimes I book a lot, sometimes I get lucky, and then sometimes I'd find what worked, do it for a bit, and then it wouldn't work for like 3 days, so I'd change it. Like, idiot. And like, here's my Stripe to prove it. So, you know, back in 2017 when I was like 18 years old, I would have like a $10,000 to $15,000 month. And you can see this here. This is July the 1st to July the 31st, 2017. So I was making like, you know, £12,000 in a month, like $15,000, right? Bosh. But then the same year, a couple of months later, I made $500. Like, what the fuck? How the hell does that, talk about an oscillation, right? So I'd go from making like, you know, 13K, 15K to like $500. Like, and it usually wasn't, I picked the most extreme example. Usually the oscillation down here, to be fair, actually, this was £3,000 because I got bank transfers. So on my Stripe, it only showed $500, but I remember now this month I got some bank transfers. So my low point was $3,000, right? So you see this oscillation playing out here. And, you know, what's the direct cause of how much money you make in business? It's how many clients you get. And what's the direct cause of how many clients you get? Is how many meetings you book. And what's the direct cause of how many meetings you book? It's how much outreach you do and how consistent and smart you are with your outreach. And so all we're seeing here is just an oscillation of me doing outreach consistently or doing it properly. So in hindsight, I can tell you with certainty that the reason for this oscillation and the up and down nature of my revenue was not the result of my approach or my copy or my outreach method. Because this is the thing, like if you can make this money in 1 month, then you should be able to repeat that over and over again. But because I was an idiot and a fucking retard, what I would do is make all this money and then break it down and then start oscillating down and getting comfortable. So I needed to have an epiphany, and it really was my belief system. When I realized this and I had the epiphany, you know, it was like my life changed forever, basically. And it really did. This was like the turning point for my success. And my mentor's words were basically echoing in my head. You don't have a personal problem. You don't have a business problem. You have personal problems reflecting in your business. And then it hit me. I was like, what's going on here? Like, why do I keep going through these ups and downs? And let me explain. So remember, your income is a direct result of how many clients you sign. How many clients you sign is a direct result of how many appointments you book. And how many appointments you book is a direct result of how much outreach you do. And how much outreach you do is a direct result of your behavior. And your behavior is a direct result of your beliefs. So your income tracks all the way back to your belief systems. So it doesn't have to be income. This can be anything in your life, anything else in your personal life, you know, that you're struggling with. It's all about your beliefs, man. All of it comes back to your beliefs. It hit me. It must be my beliefs. So what did I do? I had this weird moment of intuition, and this was where everything turned. This was my life changed forever. Because I went from being this like weird up and down entrepreneur, going from like, you know, 10K a month to 3K a month, and then like back down at the beginning. Like I went from this point to making like 800K a month in like under a decade. Do you know how insane that is? To go from basically 0 to 8 figures in like 7 years. Well, that's not normal. And you know, if you want abnormal results, you have to do abnormal things. And so the genesis of my exponential growth really came from this exercise I did here. So what did I do? What I did is I got a piece of paper and a pen, and I still have this piece of paper to this day, and I'm going to show you it in a second to prove that I actually did it. And I wrote down every single belief system I held true about cold outreach. And I wrote down everything. So I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is make the unconscious conscious, and I'm going to try and basically see my belief systems to do with outreach. And I wrote them down, and this was basically all of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 28 belief systems here, right? 28 or 30. And I wrote down what I believed to be true about cold outreach. So during this oscillation, it was a miracle I even got to 10K a month. The only reason, by the way, that I got to the 10K a month that I got to was because I was so fucking good at sales. If like I'd basically done a sales apprenticeship for like a year before, and I got really, really good at closing because I just did so many cold calls and so much sales calls. So if I didn't have that experience, I would have just been stuck at like 1 or 2K a month, right? So it was a saving grace. So I don't want you to think this is typical. Getting to 10K a month like immediately. The reason I did is because I had so much previous sales experience, right? So when I got someone on the phone, I found it very easy to close them because I already had thousands of hours of sales practice, right? Which meant that I didn't have to book many appointments to make a lot of money, right? You probably won't have that luxury because you haven't got the experience of having done like a year or two of sales and sales calls and being mentored by a really good salesperson. I had that luxury, right? But either way, so you'll get to 10K a month. It's just going to take a little longer. Maybe not. Maybe you'll get it done real quick. I don't know, actually. I'm not going to bias you. So this is what I believed. And as soon as I saw these beliefs, I was like, holy fucking shit, of course I'm struggling. I believed my perception of truth to do with outreach was that getting clients is hard. Sales is hard. Kind of contradicts what I just said, but like booking sales appointments is hard. I don't like outreach. Outreach is painful. It's hard to get clients. I'm afraid of outreach. People won't respond. People will judge me. It's hard to land meetings. I cannot get clients. I'm not good at outreach. I don't want to do outreach. Blank is more important than outreach. I'll just do double tomorrow and put it off today. I just don't get outreach. I don't have the right copy. No one responds these days. The market is too saturated. I don't know the right approach. I should get the copy right first. My outreach problem is simply cannot be solved. I thought it was impossible. I was like, it's an impossibility to solve this. Outreach sucks and always will. No matter what, I'll never get any meetings. I've already tried everything. This is a big one. I thought I tried everything. I was like, how? It's stupid. There's too much competition. I'll just let them come to me. I don't want to spam people. I'd rather do something else. Of course I struggled. How the hell am I supposed to behave consistently and, do the right thing with my outreach if I believe these things to be true? It hit me like a fucking train. I was like, of course I'm finding it hard because I believe all these things. If you believe these things, then of course you're going to act them out. So every day I'd wake up and try and fix this outreach thing, but it was screwed. It didn't matter how good my copy was. It didn't matter how good my systems were. Fundamentally, I would always sabotage my efforts and be inconsistent because I had to behave in alignment with what I believed to be true. So it doesn't matter how good your system is. And trust me, like when you get into Easy Grow and stuff, you'll have the systems. Like we'll give you the systems in Easy Grow. Like they're easy. Yeah, pun not intended. Like you'll have that, and you'll get in there, and I'm sure you'll do it eventually. And you'll have the systems, and they work. But the only thing is that if you get those systems and you fundamentally believe that client acquisition is hard, that outreach sucks, that that there's too much competition, if you believe you don't have the right copy, if you believe that you can't solve it, if you believe you've tried everything, then you'll give up and you'll be inconsistent. And it doesn't matter how good your systems are, it doesn't matter how good your copy is, it doesn't matter how much of a product market fit you have, it doesn't matter how good your product is, if you fundamentally believe these things, you're fucked. Because you have to understand that this is the first time, by the way, that we're actually sort of looking at some beliefs in real time here. Like, you act them out. You have no choice. Unconsciously, you always act out your beliefs. So what would happen is I'd get to my 12K mark or my 10K mark, but it was weird because what I was doing was there was this cognitive dissonance because I was making money and getting clients, But because fundamentally I believed that that wasn't supposed to happen, I would break it down and sabotage. And so self-sabotage often happens because you are experiencing a result that is out of alignment with what you believe to be true. So if your self-image and if your identity is that you're overweight and out of shape and that you find fitness really hard, but then one day you get in shape, like, you know, temporarily, like let's say you have like a week or two of really good behavior and you're in the gym and you're eating healthy, like if you believe that that's not what you are supposed to be and that's not you and that's not what you associate with, then you'll just break it down and sabotage it. And this was just, oh my God, when I did this, I was like, holy shit, like now I see what the problem is. It had nothing to do with the copy. Now, don't get me wrong, you need to have the right copy and the right systems. But like I said, when you get into Easy Grow, you'll be fine. Like you're not going to struggle with this. And also, like some of the training that we give you in later on in the appointment setting training, will get you started with client acquisition, right? This program's designed to get you to start. Get your first client or two. Easy Grow will help you get to that, multi-6-figure mark, 7-figure mark, become a millionaire and all that stuff. But we need to fix this first because there's no point in me giving you the systems without your beliefs. And this is why, by the way, I stress the mindset stuff so hard and why it's so important. Because what I can tell you is you are a smart person because you're doing the work. I know these mindset videos are long and arduous and annoying to watch sometimes, but you listened to me and you had the humility to do this, and now you've got to the point that really matters. And the reason that I've spent 10 hours or whatever the hell it's been explaining belief systems and identity and paradigms and the reality is to get to this point, is to become concrete and for you to realize, oh shit, it is about my beliefs. But what I can tell you has happened, a lot of people who are stupid have gone straight to the sales script. They've gone straight to the how to become an expert section. They've gone straight to the appointment booking section, and they will fail. Because what will happen is they will have the systems that work to get their first client or two before they come into Easy Grow. And what's going to happen is they'll just fail because their belief systems will be screwed. And they'll go to the appointment booking systems and the sales systems. They won't get any clients. Then they'll turn around and point the finger at me and say, Charlie's program doesn't work. Charlie's program doesn't work. And it's like, well, you're stupid. And this is like with Easy Grow, for example. I know I'm rambling on about Easy Grow, but it's such an easy example is we've got thousands and thousands of case studies and results and client interviews, right? Of people starting from nothing, starting a marketing agency, coaching consulting business and getting to 6, 7 figures. It happens all the time, right? Every other day we get a client interview, we get win posts, we've got thousands of case studies. And sometimes what will happen, one in every 100 or 200 people will go into Easy Grow and they won't get results and they'll blame the program and say, oh, the program doesn't work, or the systems don't work, or the copy doesn't work. And I say to those people, I'm like, how can you say that when we have like a 99% success rate, or at least client satisfaction rate, right? And they're like, oh yeah, it's the program. And instead of looking at themselves and blaming themselves, they decide to blame this external thing that has been proven to work for thousands of people that are just like them. So anyway, besides the point, I'm tangenting here, but you get my point. I'm passionate about this stuff because it really matters. And hilariously, all of these beliefs that I had about outreach translate directly to the following. It's painful and I don't want to do it. So, what we do with these beliefs is outreach is, and a lot of these things like eating clean, exercising, like keeping things tidy, like taking care of yourself, like keeping up with good relationships, making money. These things are hard. They take a lot of energy. They take a lot of effort and they take a lot of pain. And so what our brain likes to do is it likes to come up with these belief systems to help us avoid the pain. And so all of these beliefs translate directly to the following. It's painful and I don't want to do it. So I made this excuse up to convince myself that I shouldn't bother. I'm in denial. And I realized this is a piece of paper, by the way. So this is from when I was, I think 18 or 19 or something. So here's the sheet of paper in all of its glory, right? So what you can see is I basically wrote down, you can see here in my dodgy handwriting, beliefs are formed from experiences. Experiences can be imaginary. And then I literally wrote here, I was locked in when I wrote this thing. And you can see getting clients is hard. Sales is hard. I don't like outreach. Outreach is painful. It's hard to get clients. I just wrote them down. It was one after they just came out of me. I was just writing them down. And then And then I wrote, it's not a business problem, it's a personal problem. And then I basically grabbed all of these beliefs and summarized them by saying, it's too painful to face and I'm in denial. Rekindle your relationship with outreach and client acquisition is what I wrote here. These beliefs aren't the truth and are not grounded in reality. They are merely your brain trying to avoid pain. If you face the pain, you will find the truth and you will make millions. And guess what happened? Sorry, I'm just looking at this because it hits me when I actually look back at things like this and I'm like, I was right. What the fuck? So Outreach Epiphany, I wrote it on the side here. 7 years ago, I wrote these beliefs down, accepted that I was just in denial, and I literally wrote here, I'm going to read it again. These beliefs aren't the truth. They are not grounded in reality. They are merely your brain trying to avoid pain. If you face the pain, you will find the truth and you will make millions. And I did. And that's exactly what I did. Because this is what this is all about, is facing the pain and facing the truth. These belief systems are protective mechanisms to prevent me from experiencing pain. Because if you think about outreach, it's painful. You've got to get rejected. It's boring. It's monotonous. But then what's worse is if outreach works, I've got to do sales calls. And sales calls can be painful to do because I've got to put people in uncomfortable situations and try and close them. And if I close the sales call, well, now I've got to figure out service delivery and put loads of energy into getting these clients results, which can also be painful. Business is pain. And getting clients, selling clients, and delivering for clients, it hurts. And so what you do is your brain creates these weird little statements of perceived truth to protect you from all of that pain. Okay? But if you're willing to, literally, this summarizes it perfectly. If you're willing to face the pain, you will find the truth and you will make millions. And that's all you really have to do. The sacrifice you have to make here is just deciding to be like, I will face this pain. And it was like I was stuck at go in a car. My brain had a mental handbrake on because it was afraid of where the road might take me. Better here, safe and comfortable in your comfort zone than driving out there, God knows where, my unconscious was saying. And looking at these beliefs on paper, I was in total shock. I remember, I stared at this thing for a good, hour or two. Complete epiphany and paradigm shift. I was looking at the problem. I for the life of me couldn't figure out for months, year almost, why can't I get clients? Why am I struggling? What is this problem? I couldn't figure out what the issue actually was. I knew it had something to do with me, but I couldn't figure it out. And then I had this just remarkable moment of epiphany where I wrote these all down. It was just I was staring at the problem. It was just so blatant. I was like, of course I'm struggling. How can it be any other way? And I'm going to read this bit one more time to drill it into your head. These beliefs aren't the truth and are not grounded in reality. They are merely your brain trying to avoid pain. If you face the pain, you will find the truth and you will make millions. And this is for outreach, but this can be for anything in your life, right? Outreach is going to be a big proponent for you because you're going to go through the same thing I went through in terms of getting clients and stuff. That's why I've got loads of examples of this in my personal life. I've done this belief audit thing, this outreach epiphany thing for everything in my life. But I wanted to include the outreach one specifically because you're going to have to do this, right? If you face the pain, you will find the truth and you will make millions. You have to be willing to recognize these statements for what they are, which is painkillers. And you don't want to take the painkillers because they numb you and they force you to inaction and inconsistency. And you don't want that. So basically what I did here is, in a moment of rushed intuition, I turned the paper over and I started inverting the beliefs. So what you can see, you can just faintly make this out here on this piece of paper. So you can see the writing on the other side of the page. What I did is I looked at all these beliefs that I had, all these limiting negative beliefs, right? And I inverted them. And so what I did is I basically asked myself, what would the opposite be of all of these belief systems, right? And so, instead of saying getting clients is hard, I had to say getting clients is easy. Instead of saying sales is hard, I had to say sales is easy. Instead of saying I don't like outreach, I'd say I love outreach. Instead of saying outreach is painful, I had to say outreach is fun. Instead of saying it's hard to get clients, I had to say it's easy to get clients. You know, I had to say I'm not afraid of outreach. People will respond. People will not judge me. You know, I believe people would judge me if I did outreach. I thought, you know, the business owners I was reaching out to, or the people I was reaching out to, were going to be like, what an idiot, what a dick. But, you know, instead I had to stop believing that, because one of the reasons that I wasn't doing outreach is because I was afraid I'd be judged. And so, you know, what I had to do is tell myself people won't judge me. And this might not be true, because people might judge me, but who cares? It doesn't matter. It's easy to land meetings. I can get clients. I am good at outreach. I want to do outreach. And this was hilarious, because like I didn't want to do it. I told myself over and over again, I don't want to do it today. Oh, this sucks. I really hate it. Like I can't be bothered. I really don't want to do it. You know, of course I'm not going to do it. Nothing's more important than outreach. I'll just do double today. I get outreach. I have the right copy. Everyone responds. The market is abundant. I know the right approach. I should get the copy right second. My outreach problems can be solved. Outreach never sucks and never will. No matter what, I'll always get meetings. I've never tried everything. You know, I believed that I tried everything. So I would have weeks, days or weeks of not doing the work and not doing outreach, because I'm like, I've already tried everything. What's the point in trying this new thing? I know it's not going to work because I've already tried everything. So I had to change my brain and change my belief system to, I've never tried everything. There's too little competition. I'll come to them. I'm not spamming people. I can genuinely help them. It's my duty to do so. I'd always rather do outreach. So another belief system I had is that I'd always rather do something else. So, you know, I'd always tell myself like, you know, oh, I don't want to do outreach. I'd rather do something else. So what I had to do is change my brain to say I'd rather do outreach. Like I love it. Like, you know, it's funny because like my relationship with outreach now, once I made this switch, it was easy. Like as soon as I made this switch, like bang, the floor was flipped as far as I was concerned, because this was the thing. This is how this comes back to this oscillation, is all of these beliefs here were basically holding me down. So when we look at the oscillation and we look at our floor, right, or our personal floor, my personal flaw would be inconsistency, not doing the work, not sending the messages, not making the cold calls, just being an idiot, like not testing things, being irrational, getting angry, getting emotional. Like, you know, I would be in a state of proper pain here. And the reason that my flaw existed is because I believed these things to be true. And so I would act it out, and, you know, I'd get to this point where after a while I'd get to this rut, and then I'd try and do this, and then I'd be consistent for a week or two. I'd do the test properly. But the thing with outreach is if you're inconsistent, it doesn't work at all. Like if you miss a week or miss a month or mess up a test, like you're cooked, right? So what I did is I inverted these beliefs, and these were the opposite to this. And all of these inverted beliefs basically mean the following: I accept the pain and I'm willing to face it dead on in the eyes, bring it on. Because once I started believing these things, and by the way, in terms of how to adopt these belief systems, we're going to start a little bit on that today, but there's a few more things that need to click into place into your mind before we talk about how to actually integrate and change your belief systems. The end of the mindset module, I'm going to walk you through an entire daily protocol that you can follow to integrate new beliefs and switch your brain so your behavior switches and your life switches. So we'll talk about in full length detail how to rewire your brain and how to remove limiting beliefs and replace them with positive ones. So don't worry, we're going to go into a full 2-3 hour long video on how to do that. But basically, what these beliefs translate to is I accept the pain and I'm willing to face it down in the eyes. Because if I believe these things to be true, I now have to do the work. It's kind of impossible for me to not do the work and to not be consistent and to not do the right thing if I believe these things. Because if I believe getting clients is easy and that I love outreach, I'm going to do it. If I believe that I get outreach and that everyone responds and the market's abundant and that I will go to them and I've never tried everything, then I'm going to do it. You have to act them out. That's my point. You have no other choice. You're like a robot. Like your beliefs are kind of like they set the programming for your body, and your body has no choice. Your mind, your mouth, your body, your ears, your face, your nose, your eyes. Like you're just this robot executing on demands and commands set by your belief systems, right? And so when you do these things, like the work, when you believe this stuff, the work becomes infinitely easier. And what you're basically saying to the world is, bring it on. Because the reason that you want to believe these things is because doing the work is painful, and it requires a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of calories, and it burns you out, and it doesn't feel good, which is why you come up with this bullshit. But if you get rid of the bullshit and you replace it with the good stuff, you're still going to be in pain because you've got to do the work now, and that can be tiring, and that can be tricky, and you've got to solve lots of problems. But at least you're making progress. So the point here is that when you change your belief systems, you're introducing pain into your life, because you've now got to do a lot of things, right? Which can suck. So I was in awe of the inverted version of my beliefs about the component of outreach. It was like I'd suddenly revealed the big answer and the big secret. And I realized that all I had to do to fix my terrible appointment booking and client acquisition and outreach situation was firmly believe all of these new beliefs and shed the old ones. Because how could I possibly fail if I believed those things? Like my actions would line up, my behavior would correct, and my impulse would be controlled. Like if you actually believe these things, you're going to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, you're going to get the right result. You're going to make money. Bang, it's over. Your floor is going to become your new ceiling. You know, your ceiling is going to become your new floor. Your beliefs are going to shift, and then with time, you'll get super rich. So the question you might be asking yourself is, how does this make any sense? Because we need to talk about the delusion pocket here, because you might be asking yourself, all of this sounds good and well, but the problem is this. How do I believe something that isn't true right now in the hope it comes true later? Because it's a tricky thing to get your head around, because if this is what I believe, then that's what I'm going to be experiencing, right? So because I've got all these negative limiting beliefs, I have a negative limiting reality. And my experiences create my belief systems. And so it's kind of like, how the hell do you break this cycle? Because you need to kind of think like, what the hell's going on here? Because this is called the delusion pocket. Because this is a very fair and logical question to ask. Because let's say right now you're broke, which you probably are. No matter how hard you try, you simply cannot believe that you're rich. You just can't, because you're broke, right? You could try, but believing you're rich right now would be stupid, because it isn't true at all, and it isn't aligned with the truth. There's no factual alignment. So the question is like, well, how the hell am I supposed to change my beliefs if my experiences are confirming the complete opposite? The same thing applies if right now you find it hard to make money. You can't just believe that you'll find it easy right now. It's not going to work. Likewise, if you're fat now or overweight, you can't just believe you're skinny in the hopes it comes true. That's stupid. It doesn't make sense. This gets confusing because your factual reality, so your subjective reality, what is true right now, is not aligned with your goal reality, which is what you want to be true. So right now you're broke, you want to be rich, right? And like you can't just be like, I believe I'm rich, because you know you're lying to yourself. So how do you possibly change your beliefs to suit your goal when your experiences just keep confirming what is already true? So for me, at this point, all of my experiences were reinforcing these beliefs, and I had to have this, epiphany intervention, if you'd like, because all I was experiencing in life was no clients and ups and downs and inconsistency, and getting clients is hard. And it's natural to form these limiting negative beliefs, because at the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing with outreach. I had no idea. And so of course, I'm not going to get it right. And what happens is you get stuck then, because when you're new to something, you suck at it. And because you suck, you don't get results, and you don't do it properly, and you don't do it well. And because you don't do it properly and you don't do it well, and because you suck, you don't get results, and nothing happens, and all bad things happen. And then because bad things happen and nothing happens, you start forming negative beliefs about this thing, and negative associations and self-image and identity beliefs about this thing. And that's how you get stuck. And that's why everyone sucks at outreach. It's because they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how to regulate their emotions. They don't know how to write copy. They don't understand their market. They don't understand psychology. They just suck at outreach. They try and do it. It doesn't work. Then they say outreach doesn't work, but the reality is they suck, and that's why it doesn't work. And then they start building all these negative beliefs, literally the ones you can see on the screen here. And then what happens is they just seek to confirm those beliefs, and they get stuck forever. And that's why most people fail. That's why, that statistic, like 99% of businesses fail or whatever. That's why. That's the problem. So we need to intervene, right? But how the hell do you do that? Well, basically, what we need to do is delude ourselves into becoming successful. And usually, I don't like delusion, because delusion is, there's two types of delusion. There's pain avoidance delusion, which is kind of what you're doing right now, where you have these belief systems that you tell yourself exist so that you don't have to do the work and that you can avoid pain. But the second kind of delusion is like imposter syndrome delusion. And it's weird, but to do this properly, we need to live the lie. So you need to start behaving and acting as if the opposite of what you believe is true. We see this often with people who get imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is basically when someone gets a new job, or they start doing something and it doesn't feel like them, or it doesn't come naturally to them. And this feeling will never go away for as long as you're learning and growing. So a lot of people have this when they have a child. You know, they've been like in a relationship, and they've been an adult for a few years or whatever. And then they have a kid, and suddenly they're a parent, and they get this massive imposter syndrome because they're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know how to raise a child or raise a baby. Same thing with people who get like a promotion in a job. You know, suddenly they're living this lie where they've breached their circle of identity competence, and now they're like, shit, I don't know what I'm doing, right? So to rationalize this idea, you need to understand that you have to live a lie, and you have to start basically living a lie and becoming this imposter. But what you need to do is believe in the potential of what could happen. So, you know, if I tell you right now that you need to believe, so let's say that you're really bad at sales and you find client acquisition really hard. So what I'm going to tell you to do is I need you to believe that you are amazing at sales and that you find client acquisition easy. And you're going to be like, well, I can't really believe that because it's a lie. But what you want to do is contextualize this against the idea that the only way to really get to that point is to believe it, if that makes sense. And this comes back to the quote that I gave you at the beginning. It's all about what is becoming. It doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. Will denotes potential. Okay, it denotes potential future outcome. It doesn't matter what is true right now. It doesn't matter how broke you are right now. It doesn't matter how down bad you are. It doesn't matter how miserable you are, how depressed. It doesn't matter how shit your life is right now. All that matters is what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. Anything within the realms of the laws of physics and nature is possible if you believe you can do it and you work on it. But the thing is the only reason you will do the work is if you believe that it's possible and worthwhile doing. Because the reason that I was struggling with outreach for so long and getting clients is because I didn't do the work. But the reason I didn't do the work is because I fundamentally believed there was no point, because I believed that outreach was just never going to work and was impossible. It doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. It doesn't matter who you are, it matters who you are becoming. It does not matter what is, it matters what is evolving. It does not matter who you are, it matters what is becoming, okay? And this is why we need to have this willingness to sort of delude ourselves, really, and to temporarily believe a lie and live a lie, because your belief informs your behavior. So remember, the reason we are changing our beliefs is to change our behavior. The whole point of this mindset training is for you to act and decide and start behaving in a certain way, conducive to you achieving your goal, which is basically you just doing the painful stuff and doing the painful work to, get results after doing that consistently over time. And what's going to happen is you're going to feel like you're lying to yourself at the start, but that's totally normal. And this is kind of what you want. You want this healthy delusion. But with time, you'll start acting out the lies and they'll start becoming the truth. And when it comes to this stuff, perception is truly reality, and you can basically delude yourself into becoming successful. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I can't tell you that. I don't know what came first. But a lot of people think that beliefs and behavior is a chicken and egg thing, where it's like, well, in order for me to have the belief, I need to have the reality, because I will believe what reality shows to me. But you need to intervene at the belief level. So what comes first, the belief or the behavior? Well, it's the belief. Why? Because beliefs are within our control. And I'm going to show you, and you might not believe this, ironically, that might be your meta belief. You might not believe this in the moment, but I will show you later on in the mindset module, in the last mindset video, like how to change your beliefs and how to rewire them. And it's entirely possible. And so here's how it goes. You tell yourself a blatant lie, like, I believe I am a millionaire and I find money easy to make. So you're like you're creating these experiences. You're basically restating your belief systems and the statements of perceived truth. And because you tell yourself a blatant lie, you start to believe that it could happen. So like maybe that's possible. Like, I mean, I'm not a millionaire and I don't find money easy to make, but maybe I could. Maybe. And then what starts happening is you start behaving like it could happen. So, you're like, well, because here's the thing, if there wasn't a shred of belief in your mind that you could become successful, you wouldn't be doing this course. And so you're already doing this, right? You're already slightly telling yourself a bit of a lie here, which is that I could become successful and maybe I could do it, right? And so you start behaving like it could. So you start watching courses, you start working. And because you started behaving like it could happen, it actually does. So before you know it, you've got your first client. And then you're like, wait, what the fuck? Like I've got a client and I'm making money. And like I've fixed all my behavior and I'm being consistent. And hell, I don't even recognize myself anymore. God, I feel like such an imposter. And you start living this lie. But then what happens after a while is the lie becomes the truth. Because right now, if you told yourself you're a millionaire and that you find money easy to make, you'd be lying. But if you start acting as if that is true, and you start doing the work as if that is true, then the causes will be put to effect. And then, a couple of years from now, maybe you'll be a millionaire. You'll definitely be a lot more successful than you are now. And you'll start making money and you'll be like, holy shit. So your beliefs become your behavior and your behavior feeds back into your beliefs. So we must intervene at the belief section here. The truth is that you shouldn't focus on what is true right now. You need to focus on what can be true. We are looking to change our beliefs about the future. What we do instead is create beliefs about potential. These are beliefs that draw out potential from the future. Remember, it doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. I'm going to read this a couple more times until it's burned into your brain. It doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. It doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. One more time, and I want you to say it with me this time. You're going to feel weird saying this out loud, but say it with me. It does not matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work, that will become true. Thank you, Sam, for that one. Now, the key to this quote is with work. So, this is the thing, is you can't just, like, if you delete this bit, then you're an idiot. What a lot of people think is that it doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because that will become true. We need to have the work. A lot of people try and manifest or believe and achieve without actually doing any fucking work. Work is the secret. The thing that actually makes you successful is the work and the consistent action and behavior towards your goal. But the only damn way to get you to do the work is if you believe it's possible and worthwhile. So it's all about the work. The only reason that I have gone to the lengths I've gone to over the last couple of months to build these mindset videos is to get you to do the work. I'm just basically trying to build as many justification reasons, and I'm basically trying to sell you on doing the work consistently. That's the only reason I've made this mindset module. Mindset serves the purpose of getting you to do the work. There is no other reason or purpose for mindset to exist. The only reason I'm giving you all this information and trying to rewire your belief systems is to get you to work, because the work is what makes you successful. But as I experienced with my outreach epiphany here, because I believed all these things, I wasn't doing the work. I wasn't doing the work consistently. I wasn't doing it rationally. I wasn't doing it properly. I would just mess it up. It's all about the work. But you won't do the work if you don't think the work is worth doing, right? If you believe fundamentally that you're going to fail anyway, then you won't even try. And that's like a common self-image belief that a lot of people have, is they think they're going to fail. They're like, I have a fear of failure. And what happens is they're like, well, I probably shouldn't do anything then because I'm afraid I'm going to fail. And that's just a belief system. It's just this weird self-image thing that they've built up because for some reason something happened to them when they were like 5. It's bollocks. Present, past, and future. Do you remember this diagram from Achieving Omniscience? So this diagram, if you remember, when it comes to like the way that we perceive reality, we have the present, we have the past, and we have the future. And so reality exists across 3 dimensions of time. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to change our future reality, okay? Because, our past reality has sucked and our present reality kind of sucks right now. So here we discussed how reality exists across these dimensions of time. And with all this training, we are attempting to change your future reality because we can't change your past. The future works on cause and effect. The future is a pure reflection of the past, and all the causes you created in the past that are simply rippling through time will manifest in your future. So the way that time works is, what's going to happen is influenced by what has happened. And so basically what happens is you're doing things today, those things then get locked into your past, and what those things that are locked into your past do is they are causes that create effects in the future. So let's say, for example, the example I've got here is, let's say that you've smoked every day for 15 years. Well, that means that you have a smoker's past and your future will reflect this. And maybe you'll get lung cancer when you're 80 or something, right? Or, let's say that you've every day for the last 10 years, you've ran 10 kilometers, right? What that means in the future, and as the present unfolds to you, is that you're probably going to have a very low resting heart rate, and you're probably going to be healthier than you otherwise would have been if you didn't run, right? And so what happens is everything in your past dictates and determines your future. And you're living the future right now, if that makes sense. So the future's constantly unfolding to you, and it probably kind of sucks. Like, your future right now doesn't look that bright, at least until this training, right? If you mapped out your future, you probably wouldn't be all that excited about it. And the reason that is the case is because you're living the effect of the causes you put into motion in the present, which then got locked into the past. So the key is controlling the past. Like, if we can control the past and if we can control the causes that create the effects, then we can smash this thing out of the park. Like, your future is determined by your past, right? The question is, how do we control our past? Well, we can't. We can't change the past, but we can control it. Nothing can be done about what you've already done. So, maybe you've already done some damage in your life. Maybe you've had bad habits. Maybe you've done bad things. Maybe you've done terrible things, and you will live the consequences of those actions. But that doesn't mean that your future can't get better and can't get brighter, okay? We can amend it moving forward and change our future past today. And, this isn't all doom and gloom because, when I was like 18, 19, I had a pretty bad past. I was weak, I'd been bullied, I was a video game addict, I'd eat junk food, I was just down bad all the time, like I was smoking, like just idiot, like lots of bad behavior when I was young. And, what happened is I sort of corrected my past and I started acting out differently in the present. And over time, I sort of overrode my negative past. Another example of this is Brian Johnson, the longevity guy. You might be familiar with him. He's trying to live to like 200 years old or something, right? And Brian Johnson, for the first like 35 years of his life, had really bad health. And like he had like companies, and he was stressed out and burned out and ate like shit, and he was overweight and stuff. And now he's like 45 or something. He spent the last like 5 to 10 years or whatever it is fixing his health, and he's overridden his past. And so his future looks very bright. But had he behaved better between his teenage years and when he was 35, he would live even longer. So there comes to a point where it's just damage control, but you can override it and you can certainly fix it. And there's no time like the present to do that. So how do we control the past? Well, the present. Because what you do now is sent into the past. So this is a quote from George Orwell's 1984. He who controls the past He who controls... By the way, 1984 is a book. You can read it if you want to. Whatever. It's just a cool quote. He who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. And he who controls the future controls his life. And he is you. So what this means is what you do today is kind of like stored into your past. And that will then create an effect in the future. So today, if I smoke a cigarette, then it goes into my past. Like in the past, I've smoked a cigarette, and that cigarette will, in some small way, affect my body and my health and my dopamine system and my lungs and my blood pressure and my all these toxins and stuff, and will affect my future in a small way. And what happens if I smoke a cigarette every day consistently, and I do that in the present over and over again? Then the past starts to build, and now my future is looking a little bit doom and gloom because of this. But on the flip side, if today I do 300 outreaches for my business, then those outreaches get locked into my past, and those outreaches are going to create effect in the future, which will basically be people replying to the email. So if I send emails today, then tomorrow or a week from now, I might get replies. Or if I make cold calls today, then a week from now, I might get people calling me back, and I'll get sales calls, and I'll start making money, and then I'm going to become a millionaire. And so this is beautiful, because when you consistently do the right thing every single day in the present, it gets locked away in your past, and you get to cash in on those actions in the future. And you quite literally, from a business perspective and a financial perspective, get to cash in on your actions. So you've got to think of the past like a bank. And what you're doing every single day is you're making behavioral deposits into this bank every single day. And in the future, you can go to that bank and cash in on these deposits with interest. Okay? It doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work that will become true. And the key to controlling the past is the work. We work in the present. We do the right things in the present. We do not do the wrong things. We do the right things in the present. They stack up in our past, and then our future suddenly becomes way better. And the cool thing is the future's constantly happening to us, right? So, every little second that we move through in time, we're stepping into the future slightly further, right? And so the future will come, and it is coming. And if your past looks amazing, it will be reflected into your future. It's like a mirror. You hold up the present feeds the past, and then the past is the future is a mirror of the past. And so if your past looks really good, then your future will look really good. And what determines whether your past is good? It's how good your present is, because we feed the past through the present, and the past feeds the future. Okay? That's how this works. And that's why we need to fix your behavior. So that is a roundabout way of saying do the work and believe it's possible, and you'll actually be successful. And what we're going to do now is actually start taking some action on defining yourself and defining who you need to become to achieve your goal, so we can lock in these behaviors and start partaking in them, so we can start building up this past bank, so we can cash in on this in the future. To take the appropriate action and partake in the appropriate behavior to achieve your goal, you must have a really clear idea of what that actually looks like. In order to behave, you must believe. Reality is downstream of behavior, and behavior is downstream of beliefs. So in order to understand why you are where you are, we need to map yourself and your beliefs. So what we're going to do now, it's sort of in the same way that I did here. We're gonna get you to do the same thing. So I'm going to start getting you to become aware of your belief systems, and we're gonna list them out. So let's start by mapping your beliefs about business, finance, and money. So obviously you're in this program. Your intention is to start a business and to become successful and make money. So what I'm doing with this program is we're going to focus on your money beliefs, your business beliefs, your sales beliefs, your client acquisition beliefs, your self-image beliefs about you becoming successful, fear of failure, etc., fear of rejection. That's my focus. But I want you to know that this can work for anything, but don't do that for now. The temptation for you to do this with everything in your life is going to be very severe. But I want you to just focus on making money right now and focus on the business right now. And we can address everything else later, your health, all this stuff. You can start integrating that slightly. But one mistake a lot of people make is they try and fix too many beliefs and too many components of reality at once. Your life might be a total, complete, chaotic mess right now. Your health could be in the bin. Your relationships could be in the bin. You could be in loads of debt. You could be in loads of trouble. You could have terrible credit score. There's lots of things we need to fix, right? Lots of things. You can have all these addictions, these bad habits. But for now, let's just focus. If you try and fix it all at once, it will not work. It's just going to be too much for you to handle, right? So we're going to focus on the money thing. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And by the way, this resource is available in the description. This stops now. Let's map your belief systems around the 2 to 3 biggest issues or bottlenecks in your life that prevent you from achieving your goal. This resource is used to map your beliefs around a certain domain. When I say domain, I'm talking about a component, right? A component is a discipline or another area of your life, like money, fitness, appointment booking. Beliefs are perceived statements of truth, like convictions, assumptions, views, and opinions. Be brutally honest with yourself when defining them. Now, what I'm going to tell you is I want you to do this now, but after this video, I want you to really, really reflect on this, because when I was doing my belief audit for Outreach, which completely changed my life and made me a millionaire, I was reflecting on this for hours. I stared at this thing for hours and hours and hours to get it right, okay? So I don't want you to rush this because it is of imperative importance. This takes hours or days of critical reflection. Sometimes it can take me an entire day of thinking to get to the truth because you've got to dig through all of your pain avoidance and all your emotions and shit. So yeah, this is an ongoing process and you need to keep coming back to this. This is my personal process for breaking bottlenecks and breaking beliefs. We're only going to be focusing on changing your judgment and self-image based beliefs because if you correct these, your behavior will align. We're going to be mapping your beliefs around 3 components. What I've done though is I'm going to have you map. You get to pick 2. The first component of reality that we're going to map your beliefs around is belief itself. Because this is called a meta belief, okay? The most important domain or component to crack is the meta belief. And that's your belief about beliefs. Because if you don't believe that you can change your beliefs, then it doesn't matter what you try and do, it's never going to work. So you need to map out everything you believe to be true about beliefs, identity, and mindset. And this is the most important thing to begin with, because if you don't believe you're changing, if you don't believe that it's possible to become, if you don't believe that you can evolve, then you'll just give up. So maybe you've got this self-solidification mind virus real bad, and maybe you think like there's no way I can change, and this is all just a load of rubbish, a load of bollocks. Maybe that's what you think right now. Maybe you're just along here for the ride and laughing at me. If you believe those things, then you're fucked. You really are. So we need to correct them. So there's a document below here for belief mapping. And I want you to start with the meta beliefs, right? And what I want you to try and do is answer what you believed about beliefs before this mindset training. So when you come in to do the belief mapping about beliefs themselves and how identity works and how the mind works, I want you to try and figure out what you believed before this training. Because I biased you a little bit here. But, you might have believed the whole just be yourself thing or just stick to your roots thing. And if you did that, I want you to write it down. So then we're going to map out 2 other domains or components of your choosing, the ones that cause you the most pain. So honestly, like money and business are going to be the 2 biggest ones, right? But you can come back to this exercise anytime you need as you try and grow the business and if you're struggling. And I want you to save the 3 individual documents as PDFs. And do not get lost in the source, right? So like I said, the temptation to do this for 40 different things in your life will be rampant, but let's just stay focused on business and money for now. So here we are. So the first thing you're going to do is come in here and you're going to put beliefs/identity. And what I want you to do is label it as 1 out of 3, okay? Because this is the first one, and we're going to rename this and everything. So you can make a copy here. And what you want to do is list all of your statements of perceived truth about this thing. Dig deep, find the limiting beliefs. Don't overthink it. Just ask yourself what comes to mind when I think of X or what is true about X. Don't analyze, just write. Focus on the negative and limiting beliefs, okay? So the first list is the self-image based beliefs. So what you can do if you want is write down everything you believe to be true, and then we're going to categorize your limiting beliefs based on whether they're self-image beliefs or whether they're judgment beliefs. So remember, a self-image based belief is any belief that contains the words I, my, me, we, or our. So for example, I'm not financially literate. I'm bad at math. I suck at sales. My sales script sucks. I'm not smart enough. A bad work ethic runs in my family, right? Any belief you have about yourself that might limit your chances of business success, you list, okay? So like, for example, because we're doing the beliefs and identity thing first, maybe you could write down, I just want to love myself, right? Or I am not good enough for success, right? Or anything like this, right? So whatever the hell. And then maybe for your judgment-based beliefs, you'd say, people are who they are and cannot change, you know? That's a limiting belief about beliefs themselves. And then once you've done the list for beliefs about beliefs and identity and all the stuff I've taught you in your mindset, in this mindset module, then you can start picking the other components. So, what we do here is you could put money and you could put success, okay? So I would honestly, I'm going to write this down. Let's say about money, business, and success. Okay, so what you could do up here is you could put in like money/business. So all of your beliefs to do with money. So maybe like, my bank account
is always in the negative. And this is fine because you might feel like you're stating the obvious here, but just write down everything. And remember, when I did the outreach beliefs, I had like 30 of them, right? So just everything there. And then you want to do this for success as well, right? So like, success as well, like I am afraid of failure. Or maybe another belief you have is that 99% of businesses fail. And that'll be a judgment-based belief because it doesn't involve you or I or me or me or our, right? But you get the point. So, you can write these down here, and I want you to make a list, and I want you to spend a good half a day on this at least, and really just get to the bottom of every single one of these limiting beliefs you have about not only beliefs and identity and self-transcendence and self-change, but also money, business, and success. Write them all down. And if you write down like 3 or 4, then you're just not digging hard enough. Because trust me, if you're struggling with business, success, and money, and you're not getting business, success, and money right, it's because of beliefs. And there's dozens of them, 20, 30, 40, 50 of them that you need to dig out, okay? So do it now, think about it hard, and you can come back to it later. But once we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to invert them, okay? And this is where basically we take all of our, current beliefs, that you're going to list out here about these things, and we're going to invert the beliefs, and we're going to basically map the becoming beliefs. So once you know what's limiting you, what we want to do is we want to list out, oh, I've made a mistake here. Just want to change this to make it nice and neat and tidy for you so no one gets lost. Excuse me. Okay. So we're going to map our becoming beliefs, which is basically what I did here. So we've got limiting beliefs here, and what I did is I inverted them, so which basically means I asked myself, what is the opposite of these? And then I wrote them down, and then I saw what I had to fix and what I had to believe to make this work, if that makes sense. And so this is pretty simple. You can come to becoming belief mapping here. Just open up this one. And all you're going to do is pull up the current beliefs you have about the component in question, whether that is beliefs, money, success, or business, and you're going to basically just write the polar opposite. And if you're struggling with this, then you can always use like ChatGPT or a tool and just ask yourself like, what is the exact opposite of this statement? But it should seem pretty obvious to you, right? And you list them out, and you should have an equal amount of becoming beliefs as you do current beliefs. Okay. And now, once you've done this, you should have an epiphany, because you should be looking at all these new beliefs that you need to adopt and thinking, God damn, if I just had those, then I would be successful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to map your current self. So obviously we know that your self is made up of your beliefs, but we also need to consider a few other things as well. So when it comes to your character, it's like a video game character, right? We need to design you so that you are capable of actually achieving your goal. And when it comes to designing your character, if you're on a video game and you're designing your character, then you might design it to have a specific height or a specific skill set, or speak a specific language, or be good at a certain sort of thing, right? Or like for example, if you play like Skyrim, you get to pick what race is your character, and what you level up first, and you get to sort of pick and choose based on your goal in the game and how you want to go about it, what path you go down. Same thing is true when you're designing yourself. We need to consider not only your beliefs, which are very important, but we also need to consider your traits, your skills, and your standards. So your traits are your character traits, which can hold you back. Your skills are what you're good at, and your standards are obviously what you oscillate away from and your lowest point and the lowest version of you. So when mapping out your current self, I want you to be brutally honest, okay? Don't fabricate any part of your character or identity. It's very easy to want to see yourself in a better light than you are right now. So I need you to be completely brutally honest, almost as if you're not doing this about yourself, but another person, okay? Be honest and be brutal. So we've got this thing here for current self-mapping. So what you want to do is we're going to map your current character and self so you can figure out where your weaknesses lie and what you need to improve. You are the enemy, so we need to understand the enemy and come to terms with you so we can defeat you. So what you need to do is create a Miro account and go here. So you can make an account for a little software called Miro for free. So go and do that. And then what you want to do is use the following Miro board link to access something that I call the self-mapping template. Okay. When you open this template, there'll be like a little accept. There'll be like a little accept button at the bottom. So you need to accept that. Otherwise you can't edit it. And then you click on the Miro logo and navigate to your dashboard. You make a copy of the board and you complete the board. So I'll show you how to do this. So let's open it up here. This is the current self-mapping board. So you should have access to this by clicking on it and making an account. And then what we want to do is come up here into the sidebar like this. Okay. Actually, I think they might have moved this. These three little things here, right? And then you want to come to board. So make sure there's nothing here. Yeah, that all looks fine. Okay. These are, you can see all of my old business plans here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You come to these three little dots here. You go to board and you press duplicate. Okay. And you're going to duplicate this like so into your own Miro. Don't need to share it with the same people. You just press copy and then you can edit it. Okay. And so what we're doing here is we're mapping who you are right now. And who you are right now is broken down mainly into your beliefs, but we also need to consider your traits, your habits, your skills, and your standards and averages. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with the belief section over here, where all I want you to do is take a screenshot of all of the beliefs that you listed out, both current, just your current beliefs, right? So you should have your current beliefs for money, business, and success, and also beliefs themselves, right? And identity and self-image and mindset and everything. Maybe right now you believe that mindset's a waste of time. We need to fix that, right? So take a screenshot of all of these things and just put them in here. So you can just take a screenshot of the resource that I've just given you to do, and you should have all of them listed in here, at least 6 of these. You'll have your self-image beliefs here and your judgment-based beliefs here. And then that way you can sort of see what the problem is and where these beliefs are coming from. Then your standards and averages. So earlier on, I gave you a resource and I got you to, list out your oscillations, okay? And I got you to list out the area of your life you were oscillating in and the ceiling. I told you to do it for 10. Maybe you didn't do it for all 10, right? But you should have done it for at least 3. So you want to take the top 3 and I want you to come in here and you can edit this. So you could be like money in the bank. And then you put in your ceiling, which could be like, $5,000. And then you put in your floor, which could be $1,000. Okay? We're just becoming aware of our oscillations. Okay? So you can do this for money, you can do this for business, for outreach, for what you do, your behavior, the big 3. You should know the big 3. You might have 10, 15 oscillations that you're going through, but you want to pick the big ones that really bother you that you want to work on. Because we're only trying to attack as few things as possible at the moment so we can get you to make some money, get you a little bit richer, and then everything else gets easier when you're rich in terms of trying to solve it, right? Then we're going to list your skills. So a skill is defined as a area of competence that you feel confident acting on that directly helps you achieve your goal. So for example, maybe you'll have decent at sales, or maybe copywriting, or maybe artificial intelligence and how to use ChatGPT prompts, or maybe you're really good at speed reading. Any skill that you might not have any, that's fine. You might only have 1 or 2 skills. You might not have any. But the point we're getting across here is we need to see you for what you are. So write down your skills here, anything you know how to do with any level of competence, and put it in there. And one of the skills you could put down is knowing how to play fucking RuneScape properly, or knowing how to hack the lobby in Modern Warfare 2 or something. Anything you know how to do that's specialized knowledge, basically. Okay. And then we're gonna do our habits. So this is pretty simple. You should be aware of these. You've got good habits and you've got bad habits. So your good habits help you achieve your goal, and your bad habits prevent you from achieving your goal. So list out your good habits and list out your bad habits, and remember, be as brutally honest as you possibly can. Every bad habit you have. Remember, we're not stuck with these things. We're not stuck with these averages and these beliefs and these habits. We can fix them, but to fix them, we need to become aware of them. So please be brutal. Please be honest. Listen to me. Do not try and, sugarcoat yourself here. And then your traits. So you want to list out your positive character traits and your negative character traits. And once again, a positive character trait is one that helps you achieve your goal, and the negative character trait is one that prevents you from achieving your goal. So I don't mean positive by sentiment, because, for example, a character trait could be being very agreeable, which means that, you let people walk all over you. And some people might think that's a positive trait because it means you're being nice to people. I don't mean positive or negative based on the sentiment you give it. I mean based on whether it helps you achieve your goal or not. Okay? So if it helps you achieve your goal and you think it does, put it here. If it doesn't help you achieve your goal, put it here. And if you're wondering like what traits you could possibly be, then you can either ask your friends or your family members to get a more accurate view, which I'd recommend you do. But also, if you go here, I've made this Google Doc for you. I've listed 630 personality traits. So, I've only put room for 15 on here, but you can extend this if you want to. But what you want to do is scroll through these traits. So you've got the positive traits here, which are generally considered positive, as far as like, this is organized on sentiment, to be fair. So you're going to have to use your judgment as to whether or not these help you achieve your goal or not, right? But what you want to do is you want to scroll through them and read them all, right? And when you find one that really hits home, where you're like, fucking hell, that is me to a T, or that is like me to a T, but I don't like it, then you pop it in. So let's say that you're like a really calm person and you see calm, then you'd come in here and you'd put calm in the positive traits, because you're probably going to be more likely to achieve your goal if you're calm, right? When we'd scroll down, you might find like, maybe you feel like you're very kind, or maybe you feel like you're very loyal. You could write these things down, right? And then we have the neutral traits, which are ones that, you could consider neutral based on sentiment, not goal. So maybe you think you're cute, right? So maybe you put down your character trait as cute, I don't know if that's going to help you achieve your goal or not, but if you resonate with it, you can put it down. And then what we'll do is we keep scrolling, and I think these are the negative traits here. Yeah, we'll find the negative traits. So these are the ones that might be bad, right? And so you could come down here and let's say desperate. Let's say that you feel desperate, and you feel one of your negative traits is that you're desperate. You put it in here, okay? So you scroll through all of those traits, and there should be at least 30 that you resonate with, maybe more. You can increase the list if you want. And that way, you'll have a nice, good idea as to what you need to do. I need to actually download this, so I've got to add it to this resource for you, okay? So yeah, that's the trait thing, and it's pretty simple. And once you've done this, which you should do now, you can look at yourself, and suddenly, like, it becomes pretty apparent as to why you're not successful, right? Because now you see the problem. So once you've done this board, look at the board and then look at your goal. So, what we'll actually add here, if I just do this, I'll add this in real time. What we're going to do here is we're going to put in your goal. Okay? So you can list this here, so you can actually see your goal based off of the person that you are right now. And I'll just make this white. And you want to put your goal here. So like maybe it's like 10K a month, right? And so what you can then see is you can see your traits, your habits, your skills, your standards or your averages, and your beliefs. And then you're going to see your goal, okay? And basically, like, the problem reveals itself to you because you look at the board and then you look at your goal. And you ask yourself, do you really think that this person is capable of achieving your goal? With these traits, skills, beliefs, and standards? Well, no. This person is capable of achieving the reality you have right now. And what we'll even do is we'll add another thing, which you can do. This is all about money, right? So we'll have your current income and your goal income. And you can list both these things down here. And you might have already done this sort of with your oscillations around money and stuff. But, what you're going to start seeing is that the person who, like you are, is capable of achieving this current level of income and wants this level of income. But all of these traits, habits, skills, beliefs, and standards are creating behavior that facilitate this and not this, right? Okay? So let's map the becoming self so we can get an idea of what we need to become. When mapping your becoming self, forget about you for a minute and just think about your goal. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the same exercise again with the same board, but this time we're going to map our dream self and we're going to reverse engineer the goal. Okay. So let's just grab this. And what we're going to do is we're going to imagine that you are designing a video game character like you would in the loading screen of a video game. And you want to design this character who would find your goal a literal walk in the park. So the key here is designing a character that would find achieving your goal really, 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 really easy. Okay. And so we're going to open this up. And you probably already have a Miro account, so you've done this already. Same thing. We're going to open up this board for the evolving self, and it's the same thing, exactly the same thing. But this time, what we're going to do is we're going to take the becoming belief maps that you wrote. So in all of your inverted beliefs on money, business, success, and beliefs and identity, you should have these resources because I just told you to do them, right? And so we're going to take all these, we're going to screenshot them, and we're going to put them in here. So we're going to list out the beliefs that we'd need to have to achieve our goal, right? And what we're then going to do, this should actually say becoming self. Sorry, I'm making some lifetime edits. I'm sure you can forgive me after 3 hours of talking at you. We'll call this becoming income, okay? Because this is what you'll be making if you were this person. Let's put income. Ooh, okay. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to put in the beliefs of your inverted beliefs of basically what beliefs you are going to be believing and becoming. And then you put in your income, which is how much you would be making at this point. So this is basically your goal. So what you do is you take your goal from your current self mapping and you put it into your becoming self mapping. And then what we're going to do is we're going to recreate the oscillations, but this time we're going to make the goal the floor. So the income is the floor. So if the income for this person that you want to become is $10,000 per month, then what you do is you'd put oscillation monthly income and you'd make the floor like $10,000 per month. And then maybe the ceiling is like, $15,000 per month, right? And we're going to make these oscillations. But what you want to do is you want to pick the oscillations that you used for the current self mapping and sort of invert them so you're using the same oscillations because those are the ones we're focusing on. Then what we're going to do is we're going to list down the skills this person would have. So you're going to look at your income and how much money you want to make with this business that you're building and ask yourself, what skills do you think you need to have? I can give you a few. You need to be very good at appointment booking. You need to be very good at sales. You need to be very good at your service delivery and getting people results. Those are the main three. You need to be very good at like managing and hiring and communicating and emotional management, just any skill that you think you could have. And there's no limit to this. You can put any skill you want that's conducive to this goal. Like ask yourself, what skills do I need to have to achieve this goal? Think really long and hard about this because these are the skills you're going to develop. And then your habits. So, what good habits and bad habits would this person have? And this is kind of the point here is what you can do is you can take the bad habits from your current self and you can put them here as long as they don't like mess with your goal. So let's say that you smoke right now. Obviously, we want you to stop smoking, and I'm going to encourage you to stop smoking because it's stupid. But you could always add it, But I wouldn't personally. Basically, you don't really want to have any negative bad habits on this board. But it's still here to represent that it was here before. But your good habits, like what good habits would this person have? Maybe you'd put like waking up at 6 a.m. Maybe you'd put, not checking your phone until the end of the day. Maybe you put eating clean, eating healthy, like, reducing inflammation, cold showers, whatever. And then your traits. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go back through the 630 character traits and you're going to list all of the positive ones that you think you'd need to have to achieve this goal. Okay? And you can leave the negative ones if you want to. And that's it. And then what you can do is you can basically look at who you need to become, because all it then becomes a question of is if you adopted these traits, if you had these habits, if you had these skills, if you had these standards, and if you had these beliefs, then your income would manifest. That's the point of this entire exercise. And it can be quite daunting to look at this, but do not worry, because as we go through the rest of the mindset videos, we're going to talk about how to manage the pain of becoming this person, and then also like a daily protocol towards the end of the mindset training the last video, I'm going to give you a protocol daily that you can follow to make sure that you keep becoming this person, you keep growing, you keep developing, all right? So that's coming, and I'm going to show you how to actually become this person with a daily practice. But for now, you just need to become aware of who you need to become, okay? So now you see at a 30,000 foot view what skills, traits, beliefs, standards, and averages a person would need to have to achieve your goal and manifest your dream reality. For you to succeed and make this happen, all you need to do is become this person and sacrifice your current identity for a new one. Imagine you were this person, you'd have exactly what you wanted. It cannot be any other way. And there's lots more on this at the end of the mindset training, which will fully flesh out, and have daily procedures to follow to become he or she who can. And that's everything for oscillatory life cycles. I know it's been quite a big, it's a 40-page Google Doc here, but this is a very, you can start to see how all of this theory and this abstraction that we've been going through, we've gone through. So usually I have a summary at the end of the doc here, but I think I forgot to put it in this one and also the last video as well. So I apologize for that. So we'll just briefly summarize what we've been through here. So we talked about cyclical behavior and how you go up and down. We talked about breaking the cycle and how actually we managed to absolve ourselves of this bloody up and down wavelength that we experience. We talked about flipping the floor and really how the way that we break the cycle is in essence by raising your floor to your current ceiling and registering your current ceiling on a extremely negative emotional level. We talked about epiphanies, the delusion pocket, and basically how in order for you to become, you have to sort of live a lie and delude yourself, and that's fine and that's perfectly normal and to do that. And with the epiphany thing, we discussed how it's all about your beliefs and how you can, once you look at these beliefs, you're like, holy shit, now I know what I'm doing wrong, because really it's your behavior, but your behavior is because of your beliefs, right? Then we talked about time and how the present influences the past, and the influence of the past is created in the future, and how that's really important. And the reason that I'm getting you to behave and do the work today is so you can create this sort of good past that will create a good future. And then last but not least, we just defined our current and becoming self. So quite a lot of resources, quite a lot of action items. Do not move on to the next video until you've done all the action items thoroughly in this video, because we're going to keep building on this knowledge and we're going to use these resources again in later videos to make sure your understanding is fully complete and you continue to develop. So that's basically everything for oscillatory life cycles. I hope it hit you as hard as I was hoping. And remember, it doesn't matter what is true, only what you believe is true, because with work that will become true.